cannot rush aught. Hey, this music was made by a fan. Fuck y'all. Oh man, so some of you busy adults have things to do. Here's something I didn't know. I didn't realize that YouTube had a function where only people who paid to see stuff on your channel, that they became, I think it was a member, or they joined the channel, some shit like that. You can set it so where only they can speak in your chat. I didn't know that. I didn't know that people had to pay to talk to you. And that's a setting, an option that people can do. Wow. Okay, that's I learned something new. Will I be doing something like that in the future? No, you don't need to pay to talk to me. I don't think I'm that fucking important. And yes, I'm throwing shade at people. I can't. So, yeah. Anyway, learn all type of new things. Like if you want to the thing that comes up, Tonstronomy, if you type that into YouTube, you'll get that playlist. So that's why I have it up there, prominently displayed, so people can see who makes it and where to go get it. Tonstronomy is it's a portmanteau of Tony and astronomy. So we got some new folks, and in order to kind of help acquaint the new folks with who I'm going to review today, actually this one was kind of a viewer's choice. Someone sent me this video like early this morning. I was gonna say last night, but it was this morning. Actually, it was this morning, and it was a conversation. Not this video, the one I'm about to play. The video was True Empiricism. Now, I reviewed True Empiricism a few days ago, and this is a classic. And I thought about this. Pay me to comment. Yeah. I thought about this because people don't know who he is. So I'm reviewing somebody. So I think it's better. All the big Minecraft streamers do that. Is that a thing? Like people pay you to comment and chat with them and shit like that? Fuck that. I'm sorry. I'm like, no. Like, I don't know why y'all pay for the stupid fucking super chats. I read the shit off anyway. But I'm going to play a classic. A classic. If you don't know who I'm going to review here, because this is let me show you. I'm not going to do this whole thing because I can only listen to him for so long. But let me get through half of it, maybe 3/4. But I listened to it a bit, and I already see where the fuck up happens. But the boot happens around, where is it? Yep, about a little after an hour. So he ends up kicking Brenda out because Brenda wanted to interject because he was misrepresenting her. But, you know, he can do whatever he wants in his own hangouts. That's his rules. If he wants to interject anytime he wants to, he's going to do that. But you can't do that. And Brenda should have known. Brenda, you should have known that. You should have known that. What I want to draw attention to is something that I had said earlier in the week. And that is, True Empiricism wanted to say that, you know, he's turned over this new leaf. He wants to grow his channel. But I said, True, you do the same shit. Nothing's changed. And me listening to this hangout actually shows that nothing about him has changed. And he won't grow his channel. Because the only reason this even got attention is because Brenda sent it to me. And someone probably would have sent it to me later anyway. Right? But if Brenda and others say, you know what, fuck him. That's going to really hurt you. That's going to hurt you. Unless you're reviewing stuff like me and you're actually interested and you have a personality, which he doesn't. So options are slim. So I know I'm fucking with you, Brenda, but let me for you new folks, let me give you a taste of his intellect. True Empiricism is one of these guys who comes on the internet, and he's not unlike a lot of people. There are others, many others. It doesn't matter, atheists, deists, whatever. There's tons of them. They're just people. But they come on the internet and they think that they can speak on any topic. It doesn't matter whether they have formal or informal education and training. They think that they can talk about it because they've watched a few YouTube videos. Right? This is one of them. This is subject zero. Patient fucking zero. Now, for those of you who know what solipsism is, this is going to be fun. A lot of people here have already seen this video, and it's hilarious. Now, I want you to listen to his explanation of what solipsism is. And essentially it is, you know, you don't know that other minds exist other than your own mind. That's the long and short of it, folks. It doesn't have to get too complicated. But listen to his 41-second explanation, and you tell me if he understands this topic and can communicate it effectively.
The issue with solipsism is this, and what I just brought to your attention was very clear. We have the issue of solipsism. That's why I asked you if you understood what you were saying. You have your mind independently from my mind. Is that clear enough for you to understand it? I don't know how much easier I can make that for you to understand. Your mind, which is independent, exactly, and your mind, which you're looking at from your standpoint, what are you doing? You are subjectively determining reality and assuming that the reality that are objectively just interpreting is the same as my mind, independent from mine, assuming those things that you're looking at are going to be the same as mine. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay. Now, I don't have to tell you kind folks with more than a 60 IQ that what he said was absolutely fucking incoherent. This is just a taste of that type of nonsense. A few years ago, I sent a transcript of one of his talks to one of my professors. And so, Drag, why would you do that? Because this particular gentleman has a criticism of me that I'm being very uncharitable with him. Fair. And that my disdain for him, and I'm paraphrasing because he doesn't know these words, my interpretation of him isn't the best. It's not as objective, and I'm in no place to judge the merit of his arguments, yada, yada, yada. Big old stinky poopy head. Okay. So I said, how about this? If I type out what you say word for word, and I send it to someone who knows nothing about you and let them evaluate your own words based on their merit alone, and they agree with me, then that validates what I've been saying. And not just me, others. I took an excerpt from one of his talks, typed it up, took me maybe 30 minutes. And I sent it to my microbiology professor. Now, it's not very hard to find this guy, right? His name is Dr. LaMontagne. He was actually a student of Lynn Margulis. If you know anything about microbiology and the history of it, that name sounds very familiar, right? Dr. LaMontagne is an interesting guy. I've taken 2 of his courses. Pretty good guy, avid fisherman. I like him. He separates emotions from everything. This is like, he is cold, hard science guy. Kind of a classical depiction of a scientist. I sent that transcript to him and I showed everyone. There's still a video on my channel where I took a screenshot of his response. And essentially his response was that, well, this is just a random jumble of words from our lecture on something or other. It was like he'd recognized some of the phrases and some of the terms from one of the lectures that he had given earlier in the week. But there is nothing coherent about what True was saying. So this is somebody who has a PhD, who teaches this topic, who didn't actually recognize that as anything other than just random terms being thrown around. True got his feelings hurt. It wasn't just me being a poopy head. It's the fact that he is inarticulate as well as not that well educated on these topics. So what does that matter? This is the backstory to kind of who this person is, because he's trying to, he wants a resurgence of sorts for his channel. He wants to hit 10K. He wants to get that magical play button that people get at 10K. Cool. The contentious aspect of this, as I mentioned before, is that he's not going to change anything about himself. He has been on here just as long as I have. Yet I've grown and his channel has stagnated. Even though he's turned off the analytics, it's not very hard to tell that he's not gone anywhere. Case in point, just last night, he had uploaded a video. He did a live stream asking people for content. Well, if you have this plan of action, if you're truly changing kind of what you're doing, then you already have an idea of the direction you're going to go and how you're going to do it. You don't necessarily need to try and get people to give you content or ideas for content. That's something that you as a creator should be in tune with as far as your audience. What is your target audience? If you don't know that, then guess what? You're probably not going to hit that 10K. Also, the other criticism that I gave him was that he has to somehow change his behavior. And this particular hangout, it's emblematic of everything that I had said. It validates everything that I had said. He's not going to change anything. He's not actually going to learn more about these topics. He's not going to understand that the conversations fall apart because of him. At all. True empiricism's greatest weakness is himself. He is unable to introspect. He is one of these people who values the sound of his own voice and believing that he is somebody that he is not. And one of the joys of me reviewing videos like this and people like him are that, hey, I get to point out something that fits people across the board. That it doesn't matter what you actually believe. It doesn't matter your worldview. If you are insecure, if you are ignorant, and that you need to somehow use this platform as your catharsis, you will fail. But hey, some people have found success. Some people have. Not necessarily the success that they want, but they found it. Hats off to you. Meanwhile, some of us have a bit more lofty goals. So without further ado, folks, I'm going to play this, and I'm just going to let Brenda talk, because Brenda does a pretty good job of explaining what exactly it is that she believes and why she believes it. And she references quite a few things. And like I said, I've listened to a little bit of this, so I'm going to try and provide some context. Brenda is in the chat for clarification, so be on the lookout for that. And if I get something wrong, Brenda, feel free to correct me. I'm not like some of these other folks. You already know by now. If I make a mistake and get correction in real time, I will acknowledge it in real time. I'm not attached. My ego isn't part of this, right? It is what it is.
I don't even know if this is working.
Let me know if y'all can't hear it.
Okay, I think my mic is working. So Brenda and I are supposed to be having a debate or chat right now over atheism and theism. I sent her the link. Hopefully she'll come in soon. If she doesn't come in soon, I have to end the hangout because I am very, very, very tired. So I don't want to sit here all night. I said that I'd try to keep the discussion to about an hour so that we can try to talk about these things pertaining to both of our worldviews. So we'll see what happens. I know that we were supposed to have a debate a few days ago. It didn't seem like it worked out then. We'll see what happens now. So I'm going to go back to my computer and see if she sent me any messages. I guess all we can do right now is wait. I guess it's going to be a waiting game. See if she comes in. If she's not back within 10 minutes or so, I am going to end the feed. I mean, I'm not stressing myself. I'm just tired, you know. I mean, I don't mind staying up another hour to talk about this stuff. I rarely do debates anyways as it is, you know, so why not have another one right now?
This is a debate now.
Yes, I believe he is. I think he's an atheist. I'll see what happens, though. All we can do is wait. There's going to be a few other discussions this week, though, guys. So you have that to look forward to, even if it turns out that this person's a no-show. But it looks like most of them are going to be ID debates, evolution, intelligent design. It would be interesting if instead of having this evolution versus intelligent design debate, maybe just have two separate discussions, one only talking about evolution and another one only talking about intelligent design.
That'd be ideal.
Because I have probably just as many criticisms towards evolution as I have arguments that I could make for design. And so I think that would probably be even more interesting, you know, to have a chat or, you know, the heat on ID. But
so I kind of figured when he was referring to that was Shrew misgendering Brenda. Now, thank you for acknowledging that, Brenda. I wanted to make sure that he was responding to someone in the chat in reference to you. Shrew typically complains that people don't respect him. He is upset that me and scientist Sam don't respect him. He is upset that we are critical of him, that we hang on every jot and tittle that he puts down. True does not mind disrespecting other people. So if you're starting this conversation off, True, already misgendering someone on purpose, and notice I said on purpose, how is it that you've changed? Again, I want to keep stressing this because True likes to do this. He's just like G-Man in that there's a social decorum online that you are supposed to follow in order to make his life easier. And then that's the thing that he can do is whatever the fuck he wants, right? There's a double standard. That's why I go in on him. Because this is something that I love with insecure people. He can do and say whatever he wants, and he deserves respect. He deserves admiration. But then shit like this happens. So it's already one strike against True. It's not even 5 minutes in. But he wants.
I'll put the link out there in the chat. Okay, guys. If
he doesn't want people to make fun of him,
he shows up. It'll only be the two of us.
Okay, let's speed this up.
And now as well, I got my mic and my laptops.
How are you? I'm fine.
I'm doing great. So I guess we're going to be talking about atheism versus theism. Some
Now, the topic is philosophical in nature, right? Atheism versus theism. Whether or not you believe that God exists, is there evidence that God exists or not? How do you substantiate the claim if you affirm it, and what are the reasons you reject the claim? That's the topic. Keep that in mind.
Somebody in the comment section asked, "Are you an atheist?" I'm assuming you are. That's probably why you wanted to talk about
Yes,
this
watch
topic,
Nate's
right?
video after this, folks.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So did you want to give your stance on what you wanted to argue tonight? That way I have an idea of where we can take things off at.
Well, I'm an atheist in that I believe that there is no evidence to support belief in a God or gods. And furthermore, I don't believe in Christianity because it doesn't make any kind of logical sense to me at all. So that's basically why I have the usual reasons for believing in what I do is because I find the Christian God reprehensible and immoral, and I find the scientific evidence for evolution, the Big Bang, naturalism, and science in general to be overwhelming and to make belief in a God unnecessary.
Okay, so I'm a Christian. Obviously, you guys should know that if you follow my channel for more than a week. I obviously would hold views that are the polar opposite of Brenda's. I believe that not necessarily that I would reject science. I very much so support science. I love science. I love philosophy. I love anything that pertains to trying
how much he
to
loves
better
philosophy.
understand the world and things around us. That's actually the very reason why I think that most religions, for very at ease when it comes to science. I mean, historically speaking, we know that religion has had predominantly the most influence in helping to propel science forward. I think that based on anecdotal and the scripture itself, that the Bible very much so supports and defends the Christian belief system. And so I also believe that Christianity, in comparison to that of atheism, is far more justified rationally, logically, in dealing with morality. And so maybe you can take off from there and
Just kind of
start to begin your
regurgitating what
criticisms towards everything
Brenda
that you said.
said.
Okay, so one of the things that I hold to be most central to how I approach the world is I believe in having my beliefs comport to the evidence. In other words, I believe things on evidence and not on faith. I don't believe faith is belief without evidence, and so knowledge is a belief with evidence. And so what I need is evidence for myself in order before I can believe something. So I believe that the Eiffel Tower is 100 meters tall, and I believe that because I have good evidence that it is 100 meters tall, and therefore I have warranted belief in those facts. This is how I conduct my life, and when I find that my beliefs disagree with the facts, I change my beliefs, and I don't change the facts to comport with my beliefs. I think that doubt is a virtue. It is something that.
So it kind of sounds like when I hear Brenda say this, there's a few things that come to mind. One, it sounds like, Brenda, and feel free to correct me, that you adhere to the correspondence theory of truth, where you believe what comports to reality. There's an objective state of affairs, and you can ascertain these facts about the world, and then that's how you kind of form knowledge, right, from those beliefs that are supported by the evidence that you're able to ascertain about the world. And there's another aspect as far as, I think it's JTB, justified true belief. And again, feel free to correct me, but I want to make sure I got those. I always mix up the labels. So that's what it sounds like you're getting at. This is Brenda's explaining her epistemology, essentially. This is her epistemological framework, which makes sense. It's very, very, very similar to mine. Probably actually a little bit better articulated as well. So that's what we're talking about here, right? And then she's also inserting in the, it's essentially correct. Okay, good. Also inserting in a very, very important factor about doubt being a virtue. Now, that's kind of icing on the cake here, that when you are trying to ascertain facts about the world, you can be wrong, right? You can misinterpret things from your perspective. Everyone does it. and you should always be skeptical. You can doubt things and reevaluate them. That is an excellent virtue, but again, just kind of icing on the cake. So what I kind of expect from True is for him to pick up on some of the same things that I picked up on and go, okay, you know what, she's explaining her epistemological framework, but no, I got something wrong. So, you know, what's going on here, right? So I want to understand, you guys are disagreeing with the Eiffel Tower. Okay.
Everybody should learn to doubt and to question and to investigate and to subject their beliefs to critical thinking.
Well, I would agree with you. I think that doubt can be a virtue, but at the same time, just like overzealous faith, unreasonable, blind faith, which is unbiblical, that's not the type of faith that the scripture demands us hold to. There's many examples in the scripture where it actually tells you to test all things, hold fast to that which is good. And we're expected to always give an account for the hope that is within us. And so I think that to tie to that point, that there was two definitions of faith, even acknowledging the literature, or I'm sorry, the dictionaries as well, if you were to look at it from just a broad perspective outside of it.
So, okay, here's what's interesting, and here's where the equivocation tends to happen, right? Brenda carefully elucidated what definition she was using as far as the faith or the trust that she puts into things. Again, when she mentioned her epistemology, the word faith being polysemous, trust, whatever, there is a Christian, or I should say religious version that doesn't necessarily need evidence, and then there's another that does. And that latter one is what Brenda just explained. So there's no need into, trying to go back into that, other than, well, true, if the religious faith that's spoken about in your Bible is the one that Brenda doesn't adhere to, well, then defend why. Why is Brenda's method of utilizing this faith or this trust not advisable? Why is it that your Christian version of faith is better?
The Bible. What is faith? Definition of faith is belief without any evidence, and the other is confidence in something. We have confidence in our beliefs for a variety of reasons, just like anybody else.
So having a confidence in a belief is not the same thing as having evidence. And I think this is another fuck up real quick. Having a certitude in a claim does not change the veracity of it. So if I tell you guys, I am confident that there are squirrels outside fucking, right? My confidence in that claim doesn't change whether or not that proposition is true or false. It's either P or not P. You see what I mean? And that's something that I think the truth really doesn't understand. Don't talk about your confidence in a claim. And it's something that I think that Truth needs to really, really get down pat. He really needs to get down pat. Because a confidence in a claim has no bearing on its veracity. Very basic.
We don't come to our beliefs for one particular reason. But I would say that overzealous faith, there's a polar opposite of that, which is unreasonable doubt, to where you are dealing with a relentless skepticism in which you are constantly doubting all the time, never accepting what somebody's saying. So I think we see that a lot. A good example of this, if people have followed the last couple of videos that I've uploaded, is Alan Ra, that unreasonable hatred that he seems to have. And I'm not throwing this at you. I'm just using this as an example, that there can be an unhealthy dosage of being too doubtful. But I do agree with you that being doubtful is a virtue. You should not just accept anything that.
I'm not sure why is this necessary. He's giving a commentary on somebody else. If that's something that is, for one thing, that's a misrepresentation of Arn. If you've listened to Arn for more than a week, you probably know that. Him being, how can I say this? His bravado, right? Him being antagonistic, it does not equate to rapid or universal denialism of everything, or universal just skepticism of everything. Those aren't the same things. Those aren't even remotely close. You can be a cordial and civil and meek individual and deny everything. I'm not sure exactly what. Actually, I kind of do know what's going on. True doesn't actually understand what Brenda's getting at. He's not actually looked into any of this stuff. He's not actually sat down and read anything about epistemology. So all he can do is offer a commentary on other people. So this is becoming quite clear to me right now, and we're not even 12 minutes in, and true empiricism has already started. He's already starting to lose the plot. He's not lost it yet. He's starting to lose it.
Anybody tells you, and I think that's exactly what the scripture tells us to do, to test all things, hold fast to that which is good. And we don't believe for no good reason as well. So I'd say that there's a lot of good reasons why we believe what we believe.
There's a lot of so there's a lot of good reasons to believe what you believe, right? You're justified in what you believe. Cool. Explain why. That's what we're trying to get at here. Why is it that when Brenda says, "Hey, I believe things that comport to reality. I base my beliefs on the preponderance of evidence, and that I will gain knowledge through that." There's a mechanism. There's a cascade of things that happen, right? And that is how I am learning things and obtaining facts. I can get with that. It's not because I agree with it, because she's explained the mechanistic aspect of the way that she obtains knowledge. I still don't know why True believes the things that he does. Telling me that there are good reasons, I don't know what good reasons are. What are good reasons? Because it sounds like, to me, it's based on his personal credulity. That's what it sounds like so far. But I would love for him to actually elucidate that at some particular time. But something tells me he won't do that. And Brenda, you can confirm or reject that.
We can jump into the one point that you brought.
How would you decide? What criteria would you use to decide between reasonable and unreasonable? What is it? Doubt.
There we go. Good
Reasonable
question.
and unreasonable doubt. I think, well, it comes down to observing how somebody behaves themselves when confronted with information.
Now. This is a part that I was actually on the toilet and I was listening to this, and I thought this was interesting. So just in case you guys don't know, those of you who are fledgling debaters, right? Brenda's been around for a little while, not as long as me. She's been close, not as long as me. But Brenda's trying to start doing something some of y'all recognize. Some of y'all call it SE, so street epistemology. Brenda's using Socratic method, right? That's all she's doing. Very basic. Some people that we've dealt with recently don't like others using Socratic method. It's crazy, but for some strange reason, a guy by the name of Is the suspense killing you? Is it getting to you? Who knows what I'm going to say? Who knows? I'm definitely not stalling because I forgot his name. I'm definitely not stalling at all because his name just slipped my memory. I really don't want to use word association out loud to remember him. I'm probably going to have to because I've not seen his name in a while. I'm definitely not waiting for someone to say his name in the chat so I remember who it is and continue what I was going to say. That's definitely not happening. Well, there goes that. Shit. I just had his name too. Jesus. I need to get some sleep. Okay. Anyway. There's a really easy way to go about having conversations with people. And that is using Socratic method, folks. Just simply asking clarifying questions when you're not sure what it is that they mean. And it's a key thing to do. Some people do it honestly. Some people are very, very charitable, and some people are not so charitable when it's done. And what you can do, and let me give you an example while I still try to remember the name of the person. You want to try and steelman someone's argument to the best way possible. The best way possible. Once you start doing start using the Socratic method, however it is that you use it, because there's different techniques. But asking clarifying questions and then trying to repeat what that person said, give a summation, and then build a narrative. I hate using that word now. Based on what you believe that they're trying to say, the best version of it, and hand it to them and say, is this what you're talking about here? And I think that is one of the better techniques. I tend not to steelman people's argument unless they've already explained or at least shown me that they themselves are charitable. I kind of start with a neutral position, and then I grant charity based on how they interact with me. If they're douchebags like true empiricism, they don't get none. There's no point in me being charitable to somebody who's not going to be charitable to me. Not going to do it. So messenger reveals. There we go. Jesus. Okay, sorry, folks. That took a while. The messenger reveals is quite literally the only person that I know that actively and overtly says that he does not like people using the Socratic method. And I can't tell you how much respect I lost for him. And it's not some like weird elitist, the Socratic method. When you start saying things and people really don't understand the context, and they get
freedom. True empiricism taught me everything I know about hydraulics.
He taught all of us. But the name of the person, so let me refresh for a second. This person does not like the Socratic method. He does not like when people engage with him and utilize it. It's crazy to me. I would want someone to. If I'm using a term that's polysemous, the Socratic method would be one of the ways that people would kind of figure out the context in which I'm using that term. Maybe I'm not articulating it in a way that's easy for people to understand, right? Easily. Like that happens all the time in communication. So when someone's using that, they go, okay, here's what that person means. Okay, they've answered the question sufficiently, and now I am at least on the same plane as them now. But I've watched and I've listened to conversations, and fucking messenger reveal, no, I don't like when people use the Socratic method. No, they just need to listen to what I'm saying. Well, look here, dickbag. You don't know what the hell you're talking about half the time. You don't. Like, I'm sorry. Like, when there are people who understand philosophy way better than me, and they understand the fallaciousness of the arguments that you're making. So when you are screwing stuff up and they want to steelman your argument, they use the Socratic method. That is the gateway into them steelmanning the argument. They have to first understand it to steelman it. Well, guess what? How do you think they're going to do that? They're not psychic. So it's interesting to me for him to say something like that. But I think I know why he says that, because it's a strange thing. Once you really sit back and think about it, it's a strange objection to have in conversation. Usually people, I don't want you trying to, I don't want you trying to get inside my head, whatever. People have weird tendencies. I've encountered a lot. Okay. But for somebody to try and parse out what you're saying, and then you insist that they just repeat what you say verbatim, as if that's kind of the point of the contention right there. That's the contentious aspect. How you've articulated it was not well received. But he does this weird little dance in his head where it's because it's like a gap in knowledge, and it's like there's a reason you didn't go to an accredited school. Anyway, let me go ahead and play this, folks.
Used Alra as an example earlier, and this was an instance with I won't use myself, but I'll use somebody
he's
else.
giving commentary
myself,
now.
But
he's giving social commentary. He's not actually talking about the topic. Because what Brenda asked, and I know I went on a tangent there because I forgot his name. I don't think about him that often. Sorry. Brenda's asking him, true empiricism, How does someone's behavior play into this? What does that have to do with anything? If you're trying to discern extreme doubt versus reasonable doubt, unreasonable versus reasonable, what is your metric? That's what Brenda's asking him. His response is that he looks at someone's behavior. That's a summation. I'm paraphrasing. Thank you, G-Man. I'm paraphrasing his response. Molecular, if you want to talk to T, oh man, we need to give you some information first. We can give you some information. When's the last time you've dealt with bacterial ATP synthase? Let me hook you up after this. Remind me. It's an odd response. It's an odd response. Let me explain why. If you say drag, when you're in the lab, how do you measure the buffer you use when you're making your assays? Okay. And then I go, oh no, that's easy, right? I measure it by how it reacts when I heat it. What? No, drag. When you are measuring your buffer, do you use what units do you use to measure it? Oh yeah, I measure it by its heat. That the attribute of heat is a unit of measurement, but not for what you're using it for. Now, if true empiricism was doing asking how does he evaluate someone's morality, and then using someone's behavior as a metric for it, then you could say, okay, that's somewhat applicable here. That's somewhat applicable. But true empiricism using someone's behavior as a metric for how you discern what's reasonable and unreasonable in this context is incredibly strange. But I'm gonna play it. I'm going to play it. Molecular, he doesn't. So, true empiricism has a hard time discerning figurative and literal. That's kind of the joke.
A video that I was just referencing, there was a discussion that he had with Inspiring Philosophy, and Inspiring Philosophy had thrown a bunch of sources at him, and he explained to him, look, there's nowhere is faith defined the way that you tried to define it. And so in response to this, somebody in the, he was just saying a lot of things really, but in during the Q&A, there was this was brought up to him by one of the audience members, that there was not one single reference that he was able to show to demonstrate it, to support his definition of faith. But he claimed that he's been doing this for 20 years. I hope you follow me here. He claims that he did this for 20 years straight, at least twice a week. I think that's how he phrased it. He had a discussion twice a week for 20 years straight, but not a single source out there he could cite which justified his declaration of what our faith is. And so that was a very good example in which he had an opponent, Inspiring Philosophy, who gave a whole host of sources which helped to explain his position as a Christian on faith. And Amun Ra, instead of acknowledging all that or even being able to provide a counter source for himself, became angry and belligerent towards someone who answered the.
Okay, so this could have been a great example. He is a toad. This could have been a great example for true empiricism to go, look, when I talk about doubt in the context of Aaron's discussion with Inspiring Philosophy, Aaron's doubt doesn't stem from academic sources. His position doesn't extend from much of anything other than his own personal anecdotes over the years. Over 2 decades of personal anecdotes that he's bringing to bear against somebody that has academic sources. Now, if we're talking about what's reasonable versus unreasonable, in almost every context, a person with academic sources that are valid academic sources, have been well vetted, would be the victor there. That would be an excellent point for true empiricism to make here. Don't you agree? Now, listen to what true empiricism then focuses on rather than that. And it's an interesting, because you know what, I want to try to give him some credit, but it's almost as if he works hard to miss the mark. This would have been a great point to bring up as a kind of a meta topic, I guess, just to broach how true empiricism can contend with people he disagrees with, as far as what he sees as an inconsistency, right, of people who defer to the scientific consensus but then don't employ it. This could have been a great, great, great time for that, and he would have capitalized on this. It really doesn't pertain to Brenda, because Brenda typically does the opposite of that. She typically uses the preponderance of evidence, scientific sources, yada, 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 yada. But still, it would have been good enough. But listen to this for a second, and then ask yourself, why is he focusing on Arnwell's behavior when that wasn't what Brenda asked him?
He was asking a question. And so, the answer to what you're asking me here is, it all comes down to how somebody approaches blatantly obvious information. If you're going to strictly hold to assertions in light of what facts are right in front of your face, even though you're clearly wrong on it, you're not going to accept the information shooting down what you're saying. That is a clear indicator to people who are outside, seeing how you're acting, that you're not open-minded to it. So it's something you take by a case-by-case basis, case-by-case basis, depending on who it is that you're dealing with. How do you deal with the information?
Okay, so it's folks, I'm trying to be very charitable here. He's skirting in and out of having a valid point. He is somewhat mentioning what I had just said about evaluating claim based on preponderance of evidence. He is touching it. But then the second he starts to grasp a greater point, he loses it and trails off on something that's irrelevant. It's not on a case-by-case basis. Why are you evaluating what's reasonable on a case-by-case basis if you've just stated that it's based on the preponderance of evidence? Why does it get to change on a case-by-case basis? So that tells me that you're special pleading at some point. You have to, if it's a case-by-case basis. If you're focusing on someone being belligerent, that has no relevance in whether or not they bring information to bear. Again, the things that he focuses on aren't the things that are actually pertinent to what's being discussed. But this is the same guy who's going to get 10K. He's going to grow his channel. He's going to have better discussions. He's going to change. He's no longer immature. This is bullshit. This is the same type of stuff that he's been doing for years. The same type of stuff. Nothing has changed. Nothing.
That's how it would differentiate. If you have something that is clearly a fact, you're not going to accept that fact, or leaving the confines of subjective opinion. How are you going to deal with that fact? And so, I hope that answers.
Yeah. So your criterion is how the person behaves.
Very straightforward question as far as his criteria. That's the metric. Someone's behavior. Brenda again coming in. Hey, let me make sure I understand his argument here, because he went on a ramble here on some video that he watched on YouTube, because that's his only source of fucking information. But Brenda's getting straight to the point. Cutting past the bullshit.
The criteria that I have is, yes, how somebody behaves in light of evidence that they are confronted with.
There we go, folks. There we go. There we go. Not the evidence itself. Their behavior determines what's reasonable and unreasonable. Think about that for a second. If a stark raving lunatic who has killed 50 people told you that there are craters on the moon, that this man has murdered tons and tons of people, has been institutionalized, is erratic, screams at you with every response, does that change the veracity of his statements? Think about that for a second. What grants something its truth property? Is it your behavior? Does the facts change the objective state of affairs that exists in the world? Change based on how you as a person behave? If it's not concerning something outside of yourself, of course. If you say, well, Dragnet, you are angry, well, my behavior would indicate that, obviously. But I used an example outside earlier. Hey, if there are squirrels copulating outside of my window, how does my behavior play a role in that? If that's your metric for determining what's reasonable and unreasonable, what's true and what's false. Just think about that for a second.
What does that have to do with whether or not what the evidence says is true or not?
Thank you.
Okay, if somebody's coming to you with this whole host of information or facts, right? Let me go back to myself, okay? In the very video that I'm referencing, where I used that clip of him and Inspiring Philosophy, there was a discussion that I had with him. And he carried on about the ATP synthase, and even though this is a topic that I get into all the time, the C ring is absolutely not a rotor. There is no rotor involved there. It is absolutely not that. And so I let him carry on and carry on and carry on. I was trying to actually ask him specifically about, okay, well, if you're going to say that, before I was even going to get into the science, let's break down what the universal parts are of the most basic functions of most turbines, whether steam turbines, Pelton turbines. What are the most basic of uniform properties that they all share? But before I could even say that, he straightway denied it. And when I asked him about the specific parts of that object that he claimed that he did research into, he didn't know what those specific parts were. And so the point is that he was carrying on again, overzealous, making a bunch of claims about research he had done. When we investigated it and I pressed him, he clearly didn't do the research into that particular topic. He didn't even know what the specific reference was that I was trying to point out, but he still zealously resisted me. Okay. And so that's what I'm trying to say is, how does a person behave in light of demonstrable facts in front of their face?
Well, you haven't cited demonstrable facts. You just said that because somebody resists you. So I still don't see how that has it.
So this is, again, folks, this reminds me of conversations I personally had with him. The fact that you won't acquiesce to whatever he says and accept it for face value, that determines whether or not you're being reasonable or unreasonable. Reasonable, and Hogtie says that's not what Arn had said, and you guys will learn this about true empiricism. He loves to rewrite history. His memory seems to always indicate him being right and everyone else being wrong for some strange reason, even though there's evidence of the contrary. We'll get into that later. But it's interesting. It is interesting. Your response to someone is not an indication of the veracity of a claim. It's not. You can use that to inform you as to that person's state of mind. But you notice that his focus on this makes him lose sight of an actual metric. And that's why I'm placing a huge emphasis on this, because when Brenda's asking him about that metric that he's using, you see what he's focusing on. You can overzealously deny something that's false. So, because think about this for a second, because I see your comments, Converse. If I overzealously deny something that's false, how does that differ from me being cordial and calm and denying it? The statement's still false. That has no relevance at all in it. Your behavior does not change veracity of anything at all. There's a bit in the narcissism, just a little bit. It does not change veracity. If you have a proposition, your behavior does not change the veracity. Me becoming irate at this very moment does not change whether or not there are squirrels outside copulating. It doesn't in any sense. That has nothing to do with anything. That is something that he's focusing on, because you notice that I've said several times now that he has actually identified a way of discerning fact from fiction. He has identified more than once how you could determine what something is. He has. But his focus on these extraneous factors has him losing the forest for the trees. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. His focusing on something that's completely irrelevant has caused him to look like a fool. Again, I will ask the question. Whether or not someone's behavior is reasonable or unreasonable does not change the objective state of affairs. It doesn't.
Anything to do with whether or not what somebody says is true or not. So if wouldn't the rational thing to be to accept or reject an argument based on whether or not it's true, and not on the personality of the person?
I don't think you're paying attention to anything that I just said to you.
So here we go. Here is where the rubber meets the road. Because True doesn't actually understand what Brenda's asking him. I can tell you right now. And he's becoming annoyed because Brenda's not accepting this weird personality detector version of epistemology as something that's feasible in any sense. So I want to know, if I am to figure out whether or not a car lot sells reliable cars, and I have a choice. I can go to Yelp, I can go to Kelley Blue Book, all these other websites where people have offered facts and their stats based on the sales from this establishment. Or I can go and I can talk to the manager and judge their quality based on his personality. Which one would be better for me to discern the reliability of this particular establishment? In any real world scenario, what do you think you would actually choose? Because I see this as them talking past one another, where one person, what's going on, Regbo? As one person understanding and trying to parse out someone's epistemology, and the other not even realizing what the topic is at this point. Because at the very beginning of when we started listening to this, all true empiricism could offer from the very beginning was a commentary on someone's behavior. Not a metric by which he could judge the value, the truth value, that is, of propositions. But how he personally felt about how someone behaved. Whether someone was more, had possessed more bravado than the other person. Someone was more aggressive than the other person. Again, something that's extraneous to what we're talking about here.
You see, I'm not just talking about behavior, and if you listen to anything I just said to you, the C.
You just agreed that's what you were talking about, because that was the previous question she asked you. She literally just asked you that question. If behavior was something that you used, and the first word came out of your mouth was yes. So I was listening to that, and that's why I have on the closed captioning so people could see it. That's exactly what you said, actually. So here, true empiricism now denies what he had just stated.
Specifically, that is the rotor of the ATP synthase. If I have to go reference mainstream articles, we can read them here on spot, you'll see that every single article in regards to the FAPPAs refers to it as exactly that. Even in the literature, it points out that this is not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of objective fact. This is the rotor portion of the ATP synthase.
Yeah, I understand that.
Hold on. I just want to point this out because this is important.
I'm just agreeing with you.
I know, that's fine, but this is very important here. That is the fact that we have on the table. That is what the information says. And so we have somebody who's saying, no, absolutely not. That's not what it says. None of the articles support this. It's just something that looks closely resembling this. It's just a bunch of mess that we, of course, I'm paraphrasing at this point. And I'll just, you guys can go and check out the video. But he just straightway resisted it. Even when pointed out, while he's doing all that, while he's denying it, what's in the mainstream literature, I pointed to him and I said, I asked him, okay, that particular portion of that ATP synthase that you are saying is not something, right? You're saying it is not the rotor, is not a rotor at all. It cannot be compared to a turbine because it's not that at all. That's what you're saying. What is that portion that I'm referring to that you are saying it is not? And so the point is that I'm trying to point out to you is there is a fact here, and he's confronted with that fact. I'm not asking him to accept intelligent design. This is what the literature says. And his attitude is he thinks he knows about it before researching it. And when questioned, he didn't know about it, but behaved himself zealously in opposition before even knowing about it. Then afterwards, when confronted, his position didn't change. So that's what I'm trying to say to you.
So molecular alchemy, you're exactly right. I just got done with my biochemistry 2 course, and it is an analogy that's used to communicate the function of that particular unit. It's not an actual rotor, but that's something that a lot of these guys don't understand. True empiricism doesn't actually read literature. He's not going to PubMed and reading stuff. He doesn't. Just in case you didn't know that, but you probably already know that he doesn't. He is stuck on this because he wants Brenda to say, look, Raw was wrong and he is just a big old poopy head and, I'm right and I got one up. He's trying to score points. That's what this is about. Because you notice that he can't get away from this example. He is stuck on trying to get someone to concede that he got one up on Raw. This is true empiricism's clout chase, folks. That's why he has Matt Dillahunty and Arn in the title of most of his videos. He even mentioned it yesterday that most of his videos, that the ones that get a lot of views, are when he's mentioning AXP or Arn or Matt. That's all this is, and it's sad.
That it's not a matter of just observing behavior. It's a matter of confronting behavior with facts, and how after being confronted with facts, refusing to accept the information. Now,
okay, so now he's amending what he had said previously, because before it was behavior. Because when Brenda asked him if behavior was the metric that he used, he said yes. So it's not only that, he's changed it now about 20 minutes in, but the fact that you reject available information. So now the stage has changed. Now we're including something that could be used to evaluate claims. Propositions, if you will.
I'm not saying he has to accept intelligent design by being confronted with those facts, but okay, here are the facts on the table. What do we do with those facts? And that's the issue here. That's how you.
So the fact that you're claiming that this, what is it, the C ring?
Yes.
Is that what that is? And you're claiming that the C ring is a turbine?
I'm claiming that the C ring is the rotor portion of the turbine.
Yeah, and does the literature say it's a turbine?
The literature does say that it is a turbine, that the ATP synthase is a turbine, and specifically the C ring is the rotor portion of that turbine.
Okay, but the argument is still fallacious.
But you would acknowledge that his behavior was indicative of somebody who was overly zealous in the sense of unreasonably doubtful, to the point to where he could not learn or be open to new information because that new information conflicted with his worldview. And so he didn't even have to accept my argument. You can say it. I mean, we can talk about it being fallacious if you want to, but the point here is that because our Ra is so far to the left.
This is interesting, folks. This is interesting. So if I am to take this on face value, right? The analogy that's used in most textbooks about the motor, turbine, whatever, ATP, because this is the same ATP mayonnaise stuff we've heard for years. If true empiricism is using behavior as a metric for what's true and what's not, what's unreasonable from folks, we have videos, and I say me and Sam have done tons of videos pointing out that True doesn't understand very basic things in biology. Genetics, specifically. I've yet to hear him correct himself. And I'm going to bring up something, and some people were mentioning it earlier in the chat. Who remembers DNA degrading in water? Who remembers that? Raise your hand in the chat if you remember DNA degrading in water. And in molecular alchemy, I don't know if you were around for this, but molecular alchemy, I'm pretty sure you and a few of us others in the chat, you've done PCR at some point in time. You've done PCR. When he first put forth this idea that DNA, the basic nucleotide sequences all break apart from one another once they're immersed in water, which would make PCR impossible to do, this guy stated that that is how degrade works as far as chemistry. Now, molecular alchemy, I'm going to go based on my recollection. When we did not actually understand how DNA was replicated in organisms, there were three working hypotheses as to how it worked, right? One version dealt with all the nucleotide sequences being split apart from one another and just kind of free floating, kind of like with the oligonucleotides that you would use in your reaction mix. But there is another version in which, one sequence remained intact, and that it was used as a template for the additional sequence on top of it. And so you would get 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, and it would multiply. And then there's another version. I think there was a combination of the two that I forget what it is. But basically, we found out how DNA replicates by, I think, irradiating one of the strands, and then experiments were done. True empiricism was putting forth one of the debunked hypotheses that I just mentioned, that first one. It's funny because this is textbook material. Textbook, folks, material that he was trying to support. If you don't remember, and if you want to watch this yourself, Hogtie Champ in the chat here has a video with True Empiricism. I think it's called True Empiricism and Hogtie Solvate the World's Problems, where he actually explains that that's how DNA replicates. Not knowing that if you sat down and thought about it for a sec, you thought about the topoisomerases and all the little, fun molecules that he loves to mention. If he actually understood how they work, he wouldn't have said that. And we spent well over a year explaining to him that's not how things work. Well over a year, folks. Well over a year. So it's interesting that he talks about unreasonable in light of evidence when that's exactly what he's done. Very interesting. If that was our metric, then he himself would be unreasonable. I'm going to let this play. Let me go piss real quick.
Left in his views, he was so unreasonably doubtful towards and skeptical or resistant, however you want to put it. We're talking about doubt, that he was not able to accept factual information because he was concerned. He was in concern over what those implications might be with that information, rather than just stepping back and thinking, okay, well, you know what? He might be right about this, but let's sort this out and see, does this necessarily lead to the idea of design?
So I really highly doubt that. I think he was reacting to your claim that the structure on ATP synthase is in fact a turbine, and I highly doubt that it actually says that in the published papers.
Well, I have no problem with sorting that out. We can talk. In my debates with Emperor Atheist and many other people, I've referenced at least 5 or 6 of these articles. And you can probably just Google it in Google Scholar right now and find a couple on the very top. But all of them, there's some of them dealing with spinach. There's all sorts of articles out there. But yes, I don't think anybody questions that it rotates. It spins. I didn't say that. I didn't say does it rotate or spin. I'm talking about, is it a turbine? Word for word.
Right. It's not. It's not a turbine.
But okay, so that's what we're going to have to do then. Go to what the literature actually says. And for people who are going to be watching, I want you to understand that this is the way that
Now, y'all remember the topic? So, Brenda, this is something that if you want to talk to True, which I don't know if you'd be able to, he wants to get on this topic. There's a reason he moves all conversations to this, right? There's a reason for it. He knows nothing about epistemology. Because if you notice, when you were performing the Socratic method, when you were asking him to explain and elucidate how he comes to conclusions in his worldview, put that in quotes, you notice the answers that he was getting? All of these answers move towards his spiel. That's it. That's it.
I approach it. There are articles out there. There's a database of articles for intelligent design, for and against evolution, or against evolution and for intelligent design. But the way that I approach it is I try to just go to the mainstream articles as to avoid certain genetic fallacies that people might display. So the mainstream literature is what says this. No ID proponent, no articles from ID proponents is what I'm referencing here. So just give me a few minutes and it won't take me that long.
Well, the problem is that the entire argument is false. It's an argument from ignorance.
It
was dealt with by...
One point at a time. Are we going to deal with whether or not the articles actually say that this is a turbine, or are we going to say we're going to deal with first that it's an argument from ignorance? Which one?
No, I think it's well known that intelligent design is pseudoscience, and that the argument that structures are intelligently designed is an argument from ignorance. And okay, so Darwin dealt with this objection 150 years ago. Okay, I would rather address.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I'm looking for this article right now. What'd you say?
I said that Darwin dealt with the objection 150 years ago. It's an argument from ignorance. Complexity does not indicate design or mean that something couldn't evolve. This is well known and well understood. We understand how complex biological structures can evolve, like the eye. The eye is a complex structure, just like the rotors in bacterial flagellum. And we've shown how complex eye structures can evolve, and we've shown how the bacterial flagellum could evolve from simpler structures. It's well known in the industry. This is a settled deal. This isn't an argument that's really available to you.
So for the people who are watching right now, this is the first article that I can find that is as direct as possible. I'm going to this right here. A second.
Intelligent design is pseudoscience. That's not an opinion. Right? That is actual fact. It is pseudoscience.
Well, I would rather deal conceptually with the argument.
Okay, so here's
irregardless of any evidence that.
So Brenda, you say irregardless one more time. I'm gonna reach through this fucking screen and choke you. This is good though. This is good. So for those of you who don't know, you're not that well versed in having conversations, right? Having discourses with people like this. Some ID proponents like this. They want to move the conversation in a direction. If you control the conversation, that's the best thing that you can do. He's getting so far away from this damn topic that it's clear to me that he does not actually want to deal with the epistemological aspects of what they began talking about at the very beginning. No, this is just a solo hangout. This is not Streamlabs. Or StreamYarbs, rather. This is Streamlabs. Think about this for a second. What did they start talking about at the very beginning of this? What were they describing 24, 25 minutes ago? What were they talking about? Does anybody remember? Why is he looking for an article on ID? Why is he looking for that? You're not even established how you discern what's reasonable versus unreasonable, but you're trying to supply, I guess, evidence when that's what's being discussed. Exactly. How it like that I don't think he actually gets that. If you are disputing, folks, how it is that you are to discern what's reasonable versus unreasonable. How are you then moving to providing evidence if you've not figured that out yet? You're drawing the cart before the horse. So Brenda's moving, for those of you new to this, she's moving the conversation back to where it was. This right here is one of True's tricks of the trade, to go to his favorite pet topic. It'd be like me moving every conversation into essential amino acid synthesis. I know he knows nothing about that topic. If I moved every conversation I had with a theist into that topic, they'd have nothing to say. How many people in the chat know anything about essential amino acid synthesis? How many times have you spent, an hour or two in the lab running assays on that? Reading literature? Probably not many, right? You see folks do this a lot. Stay on topic and force your interlocutor to stay on topic. Because going to pet topics is obvious, but it doesn't make for a great conversation. So, yeah, he's looking for a mainstream article. Yeah, mainstream. Ignoring the fact that Brenda destroys argument. That's essentially what's happening. Because Brenda's already parsed out the bullshit behind the curtain. And so now he needs to move it away from that. Because he realizes at this point, 25 minutes in, that this is not good for him.
You give, the argument is fallacious because it's an argument from ignorance. Do you know what is design? How do you know what's design?
Again, great question. Great, because he's already tried to move it to ID. What's our metric? Again, notice that. And again, I'm pointing folks. Carlton, pay attention. Take some notes. When you hear an ID proponent defer to design, I don't know what that means. I see all types of stuff. I see all types of reactions. Specifically, what's the reaction I always mention? Dehydrogenase reaction from semialdehyde dehydrogenase. I can look and I can say, okay, what is that? Those are words. Maybe you might have made that up. How do I determine what that is? Okay. I can determine what is happening in a reaction based on a chemical metric. There is a molecule, and the molecule either has hydrogen attached to it or not. That is my metric. All right? So when I say that I'm looking for X reaction, I am establishing that there is a state of affairs and there's a way for me to evaluate what's happening. Brenda is asking him, and I'm trying to break this down for you, some of you new folks who want to get into this. Brenda's asking, how is he able to ascertain what these things are? I have yet to hear an ID proponent give me a metric for what complexity is. I have no idea what that means. There are all types of complex things in my lab. There's all types of complex things that I deal with. If I look at a crude lysate that I've generated from smashing it and putting stuff in it, there's complexity in that goop. What is complexity? How do I determine that? Why is that even a metric for what we're trying to look at? Which is an even more important question. I could measure things based on how it feels on the tip of my penis. Is that a good metric? Let's discuss that. These are questions that, if you're saying that this stuff is science, are very pertinent. And when you have non-scientists who know nothing about actual science try to talk down to other people as far as what's in the literature, my balls tend to itch just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because he doesn't know anything about this stuff. And yes, G-Man, that's hyperbole.
Everything that you're saying right now, but I want to do it one point at a time so people understand nothing's going to be missed. So this is from
I've not missed
Bioscience
anything,
Reports.
Brenda
As you guys see, the link is in the description below. You got, or the chat below. Read through it. What does it say? The crystallographic structure of the turbine C ring from spinach chloroplast F ATP synthase. So what is it saying? The structure of the turbine C ring from the spinach. And so I'm going to go down here. I'm going to skim through it really quick because I'm obviously not going to read the entire thing, but you'll notice that it's going to be referencing some of the exact same parts. It's going to call it and describe it as a turbine and then break down the parts. For example, it mentions the rotary. Let me see where it's at. I know I've read this a long time ago. It starts using the same languages. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the introduction. The F1 F0 ATP synthase is a membrane-bound multi-subunit complex consisting of two rotary motors in the F0 and F1 sectors, respectively. The membrane-bound proton translocating ATP synthase of the chloroplast. The SCF1F0 catalyzes ATP synthase of the ATP hydrolysis coupled with proton translocation across the F0 section of the chloroplast F1 domain. And so that's really all you need to see right there. It keeps on referring to what I'm saying here about how you projected the ring goes down.
It's irrelevant.
Well, hold on a second. But
it's irrelevant because the argument is fallacious.
I'm reading still on. The chloroplast, it's not irrelevant to what you just said before you changed the goalposts and started talking about now it being an argument from ignorance. This is a complete refutation of what you first said about what it was not. So here's what a mainstream article is actually saying what it actually is. And so what is it saying? The C-ring rotor subunits of this turbine.
So Brenda's saying that it's irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant to the topic because it is irrelevant.
Continue reading it. It's going to explain it exactly how you guys have heard me explain it 1,000 times in the past. And so moving on to it being an argument from ignorance, it's not an argument from ignorance.
Well, I can accept that I was not aware that that it refers metaphorically to this structure as being the C-ring structure as being a turbine. That's fine. That's fine. Obviously, it does. It's not a big deal because the argument is still fallacious.
Yeah.
It's an argument from ignorance.
Well, the first thing that I think we should note here is that this is not one of those instances where you can say, well, it's just comparable or just analogous to a turbine. It is a turbine in its most basic function and parts.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll admit that. I'll accept that.
Okay.
That's fine. I accept that. That's fine. The argument is still fallacious because it's an argument from ignorance.
Okay, explain why you keep on saying it's an argument from ignorance. Because if you're going to accept what I just said to you, then you should not be saying that it's an argument from ignorance.
Why?
Well, that's why I'm asking you. You just heard me break down a fact.
Yeah.
Reality. The ID argument that I've talked to you before in the past is trying to base our understanding on our uniform experience, on cause and effect. And so you cannot like the ID arguments, but I am trying to figure out how you're using the argument from ignorance in light of a causal argument that's being presented to you. Doesn't make any sense to me. So can you
haven't presented a causal argument at all. You presented an analogous argument.
Thank you. Yes. This structure here, and it is, it's a crystalline structure, but he's going to skip over that. This structure here in nature is analogous to what we here know to be a rotor. It's used as an illustration to help people understand conceptually what's happening here as far as what's interacting with a proton gradient. And when you have this structure in place, you have a proton gradient built up on the other side of the membrane, right? And you get a phosphorylation event that happens, yada, 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 yada. Here's how you get energy. That's all that does, is to illustrate, to help people get it, right? That's an analogy, an illustration to help people see it, because we can't visually see it. It is an analogy. So again, he's introducing now a causal link between him making this observation using an analogy with no causal link between them. So if he can say that, let's let him say that. And yes, Brenda, I accurately identified that. What is the causal link? What is the causal link? So it's his job now to provide, because he said it. What is the causal link between these?
Okay.
You're arguing from analogy, not from causation.
No, I'm arguing.
Yes, you are. You're saying that because it looks like a turbine, therefore it was designed. No. And that's an argument from analogy.
No, sir. There's two things that I can do.
No,
here,
sir. Okay.
Two things. The one thing that I can do is I can make an argument from analogy, which you are trying to distort the ID arguments from being. And either way, it would not be a problem for me. But that's not what I'm doing. You see, here's the reason why. If I were to use an argument from analogy, like the brain, right, the random access memory, CPU, motherboard, we compare it to a computer. But in reality, the synapses that you see that are being shot through your peripheral nervous system to your central nervous system, it's not comparable.
Yeah, he doesn't
it's
get
analogous,
that.
But it's not the same thing. But the question I would have to ask is, why are we finding patterns inside of nature that seem to only be analogous to our own creation, not some sort of unintended gradual process? So I can argue from analogy if I want to, and it would be no problem for me. It would still be an issue.
So it wasn't an analogy, but then he's going to give you an analogy, and it wouldn't be a problem for him. Then why did you disagree before when you used an analogy when she had asked you that question? It's almost as if he's disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing. If what you were doing true and you vehemently denied making an argument from analogy, why would you then follow it with another argument from analogy and then state that it's not an issue? That makes no sense. So then your previous point of contention is null and void. You just seem like a petulant child at this point. Again, if we're evaluating, because this is what we do now, this is how we evaluate whether people are being unreasonable or reasonable in their propositions. I see someone being unreasonable. Should I use that as my metric for determining whether or not he's full of shit? If that's what we're doing? Interesting. When you apply nonsense to the person spewing it.
For you, but that's not what I'm trying to argue for at all. I'm arguing for what something actually demonstrably is, and if something is a demonstrable 100% turbine, the question is that what does that mean? Based on our uniform experience in every single instance in the past, a turbine has always come from an intelligent agent. There's no opinion there. There's no beliefs, religious belief. There's no faith there. It is. We all know this for a fact.
So, if you're identifying that turbines, as we know them, come from intelligent agents, i.e., humans, right? Humans are those intelligent agents. So this is something that I like to always ask intelligent design advocates, whatever the fuck you want to call them. Where have we observed an intelligence without a substrate? Because if you're going to tell me that intelligent agents are what we observe, then an inherent property of those intelligent agents is that they possess a substrate, which you see here is the substrate. You're proposing that a substrate-less intelligence did what agents who are intelligent, who possess a substrate, also do. An unprecedented thing in our history as humans. Interesting. It just shows his ignorance in molecular bio. He understands a brain isn't a computer. He doesn't understand the same principle applies to biological machines. Yeah, so you'll see him jump in and out of accepting analogies. You'll see him jump in and out of that. But it's a testament to true dishonesty. Just like before, where it was contentious that what he had offered was an argument from analogy, only for him to then provide an argument from an analogy and then say it wouldn't be a problem. If that's not what you're trying to then utilize, then why would you then defer to one in your subsequent response? So, again, just little things like that. See design proponents, yeah. I want people to take a second, because this is about 30 minutes in. This conversation only actually lasts a little over an hour because he ends up removing Brenda because he's upset. In the last 30 minutes, and I want you guys to type in the chat, who's been doing the majority of the speaking in the Hangout? In the last, this is about 31 minutes, 13 seconds. Who's been doing the majority of the talking? Vast majority. I want you to ask yourself that. Type it in the chat. I'm going to make a point later.
We've all been exposed to modern society since we've been born. If you come from a first world country, so we know that these things have so it's an argument from causality. It's analogy.
No, it's not an argument from causality. You don't even know what that is. It's an argument from ignorance, because what you're saying is, I don't understand how this evolved, therefore it didn't evolve. That's an argument from ignorance. That's what you're saying. You don't understand how this structure in cells could have evolved, therefore it didn't evolve. It was designed, and that's an argument from ignorance.
That's actually not what I'm saying at all.
Well, then what are you saying?
It could be true. What I just told you, what I'm saying that based on our uniform experience at every single instance in the past, we understand, we know, we have knowledge that creators have always built this specific creation, right? So the creation is an indicator of a creator based on our uniform experience. And so just playing with what you're saying right there, we can grant you that possibly that there was, we don't know, we don't know how evolution could do it.
Your argument doesn't follow.
So he actually acknowledges that all of Brenda's points were right? You just said that we don't know. Just literally said, Jesus. Hello? Hi. How are you? What are you wearing? Oh, that's nice. And that's how you get people to stop talking to you. So, look, when you are trying to figure out where somebody is going with their arguments, sometimes you can mention, like, look, what you're offering here is fallacious. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. And I'm not saying that what Brenda's saying is wrong at all, but I am pointing out that some people actually get triggered, and I know that's an overused word, when you mention that their argument is fallacious. One thing that I like to do is that when you are trying to parse out someone's argument, because I've done this to Veckel before, don't mention the name of the fallacy. Use the form of the fallacy. So, Dragnet, what do you mean? So, it may be easier for me to maybe easier for me to show you. Looking for, there's something specific that I'm looking for. It might be this one. Okay, yeah, you know what this is. This will work. This will work. Let me blow this up. And I found this using, when I mean the form, I mean the logical form here. Okay. So use the form, let's say, intelligent design is true because you can't prove that evolution actually, because you cannot prove that, evolution is false. Whatever. X, is that the right form of it? Hold on. X is true because you cannot prove that X is false. Oh, I'm sorry. No, you can't. That would have been Y. Intelligent design is true because you cannot prove that intelligent design is false, right? Evolution is false because you can't prove that evolution is true. There we go. I thought that was a Y. If you're trying to parse out somebody's statement and it sounds fallacious, when you see these logical forms, these are actually very helpful. These are very, very helpful. Because what I have encountered is that the second that you mention the name of the fallacy, people knee jerk and they, no, I'm not. You can have a fallacious argument and a correct conclusion. Like a conclusion that you draw from a fallacious argument can be true. It's rare, but it happens. And it's not the end of the fucking world. But people have a visceral reaction if they understand fallacies. So while you're having a conversation, keep these logical forms in mind. When you're doing the Socratic method, when you're trying to parse out their statement, put it in one of these forms and then ask them if it's true. Because if it fits into this particular logical form, and then you show them, well, it's interesting, hey, that you agree to that. I just put your argument into this particular fallacious logical form, whatever, and you agreed, so you do agree with me that it is, an argument from ignorance or an appeal to ignorance, whatever you want to call it. When people get to that point, it's hard for them to retract to it. Hard for them to retract what they said, excuse me. When something like this happened with me and Veckel, and I'll give you a very brief example. So Veckel has a very interesting habit of saying words and not actually understanding what they mean. In fact, he does that a lot. So when he's describing God's morality as objective and not subjective, and then he begins to say that it's based on God's opinion and his will, and I was like, that sounds a lot like subjective, but okay. And he denied it. I said, all right, I know I'm not going crazy. Let me just pull up a dictionary definition of subjective. Maybe I'm fucked up. So what I did was that I said, okay, I see the example that they give here, the definition of subjective. If I replace person with God, I wonder what Veckel will say. Sure enough, I said, okay, Veckel, it's based on God's, his like personal opinions, his yada 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 yada. He's like, yeah, that's close. Yeah, that sounds, yeah, that's it. Now you're getting it. And I said, okay, are you sure that that's objective in the sense of God's morality? Yeah, that's it. I said, well, that's interesting, Veckel. I just read you off the definition of the word subjective, and I replaced person with God. No. And it was glorious. That one defining moment with Veckel showed me that there's so much, he is so beholden to a belief that he is unwilling to even acknowledge when he has put his foot in his mouth. Even after I'd asked him if it was the case, if he was sure. And he affirmed it. And then I told him where I got that definition from and what word was attached to it. It told me two things. He doesn't actually know what that word means, and that he is so beholden to his beliefs that evidence doesn't matter. that plays a role in the metric that they were asking about earlier, as far as their discussion. So in that case, is Veckel holding an unreasonable doubt or a reasonable one? So it's interesting there. When you apply their same nonsense to them, you see the cracks in the facade. It's interesting. So ID is an argument from ignorance. That's ID rests upon the gaps in knowledge of actual science. That's so, and I can go into detail on that at a later date. But when there's no criteria, and let me very briefly, is this the Naked Atheist dream we've all been looking for? Yes, it is. There's a very simple question, or you could say series of questions, but there's a very simple point that I make towards ID proponents, and that people who don't understand what people like Karl Popper put into place as far as how science is conducted, actual science, with the demarcation between what is and what is not science. It's not opinion. Because routinely in these conversations, you'll hear people defer to, well, I don't think that that's science, therefore it's science. I think it is science. That's not what determines what's science and what's not. And there are scientists in the chat that can verify what I'm about to say. There's a demarcation. You can look this up. The demarcation of what is and is not scientific. And that's falsifiability. I actually took a whole course in this. Yes, there's a course. It's called Seminar in Biology, where you are taught the philosophical underpinnings of how science works. Any science major has to take that class. All of us. It's like a capstone class, I think they call it. But that is how you solidify your understanding of how science is actually carried out. Again, it goes under the philosophical aspects of it. And you learn about Karl Popper, you learn about Bertrand Russell and all types of people. So when you talk about things that are unscientific in respect to intelligent design, ask an intelligent design proponent, what is your criteria of falsifiability with intelligent design? And wait. And wait. And wait. What falsifies intelligent design? I've gotten all types of answers, and they've been funny. Because I compare it to, again, what I do in the lab, and it's laughable. We'll drag, what's an example? Okay, so in comparison to what I've been told, if I don't find dehydrogenase reaction in one of my experiments, then you know what? My hypothesis is invalidated. No, that's ridiculous. I can screw up an experiment and not find dehydrogenase reaction. I can have shitty reagents and not find that. Me not finding something intelligently designed is not an actual falsification. So, again, the people who put forth this stuff aren't science advocates. They don't actually practice science. They're science enthusiasts. I think so. I absolutely believe True when he says that he enjoys science. I don't deny that at all. In fact, he would have made up having a degree if he didn't enjoy it to some degree, right? But he doesn't actually know how science works. And it's taken me several years to actually understand it. And I have to stress actually. You can have an idea. And when I heard, I've heard terms like p-value, I've heard failure to reject, I've heard phrases like that. But understanding what they really mean takes time. It takes time. It takes time. DNA has symbiotic information encoded. I don't know what that means. What do you mean symbiotic information encoded? What is that in reference to? I don't know what that means.
Here's the point. Here's the
It
point.
doesnn follow. It doesn't follow.
Here's the point. Just by granting you what you're saying, here's what's important here. We can grant you that, okay, fine, we don't understand how a creator could, how evolution could do this. Maybe evolution could or couldn't do it. Who cares? Maybe it's another option there on the table. But regardless, intelligent design would always be that additional fact. You have two options on the table, right? Creator we know always builds turbines. We know that. Always builds turbines.
No, you don't. That's the point.
Can you not
don't. That's the point. You don't know that.
Please, can you not over talk? Because I don't want this to go downhill so quickly. Come on now. You're going to say that we don't know that designers don't build turbines?
We don't know that every turbine has been produced by a designer. You don't know that. That's a non sequitur.
Every single instance in the past.
Yes, that's irrelevant.
Knowledge. Hold on a second. As far as our knowledge goes, where we have actual, obtainable, demonstrable knowledge, not a theory that tries to infer based on a set of facts to come to a conclusion. We all have actual knowledge that creators build turbines. So
no, you don't have that. I deny that. You don't have that knowledge.
Okay, so you don't know that creators build turbines.
You cannot logically infer that because all turbines in the past have been created by designers, that therefore this turbine-like structure you see in a cell was created by a designer. That doesn't follow. That's a non sequitur.
No, you don't understand. Because of every...
How many people realize what Brenda just did? She put his argument into a syllogism. If you didn't catch that, if you did not catch what Brenda did, and he didn't catch it, she put his argument into a logical syllogism and then told him how it was fallacious. Now that, again, this is for people's benefit, right? It is a non sequitur. It is absolutely a non sequitur. And someone mentioned the black swan fallacy. Again, he does not understand that. So, and no, it's not an opinion that molecular alchemy actually put. It doesn't make sense. The phrase symbiotic information is nonsensical. I'm not sure how the word symbiotic and information go together in any sense. I'm not sure how that adjective and that noun actually relate to one another in the context of molecular biology. That's not something that you'll find in literature. Again, if there's some literature that someone would like to post to substantiate that, I've literally never heard of that.
Every single instance in the past, because of the fact that in every single instance in the past that our knowledge goes, an intelligent agent has always produced a turbine, we are looking at this object in the cell, which is also a turbine. So therefore, we utilize our induction to infer that that turbine was also the product.
Here we go, folks. Here we go. We utilize our induction to infer that the turbine is also the product
of a designer as well.
Of a designer. We use our induction. Now, what did I say earlier, folks? What did I point out earlier? Every designer, every intelligent agent has a substrate. Did I not point that out? Is that not an attribute? Because if he's trying to make that argument, then it still doesn't follow, because the agent that he is implying exists does not have a substrate. Every turbine, actual turbine that exists mechanistically, has a designer that we can physically find, that we can track down. Some of them even have schematics from said designer. So if you're trying to use induction, you're doing it wrong.
Hold on a second. I know you're
No, you can't make that inference. You can't.
See, hold on a second, please.
The molecular alchemy, the only thing I could think of is possibly transposons. Like that, I'm being very, very charitable there.
Just like in science with evolutionary theory, you only see small variations and changes happen now.
So now we're on evolution.
We do not see all of these creatures diverging over millions of years. This is
Look at it. So we're at 35 minutes in, folks. We're at 35 minutes in. Now we've gone from the topic, which is atheism versus theism. We've begun to, and I can't really say discuss, because we still don't know how exactly true empiricism's epistemology really works. We have a loose understanding. Brenda did a great job at trying to parse out how he comes to conclusions, and it seems to be primarily based on behavior. Again, primarily being the operative word here. He acknowledges that another aspect of it involves the preponderance of evidence, but the main focus is on someone's behavior, their demeanor, if you will. Again, not a great metric for discerning fact from fiction, reasonable versus unreasonable. In fact, if we were to get into it, and I might have to pull Sock Account or someone else and later hang out to discuss this, we could talk about what constitutes as evidence, because that's actually a really interesting topic that I recently had the pleasure of speaking to Sock Account and some others about in reference to the Munchausen trilemma. Again, this is not a philosophy hangout per se, not really my field, but I think it is interesting to see, how is it that we determine what constitutes as evidence. That's actually very, 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 very interesting topic. Caressa is saying that he needs citations for what I'm saying is true. As far as what it's not my position that symbiotic information exists in DNA. That's the claim would be substantiated by the person making the claim. Last time I checked, unless I misunderstand the burden of proof here, based on my knowledge, my recollection of the science that I've been studying for the last 5 or 6 years, no such thing has cropped up. And so I would definitely defer to people who have been in the field way longer than me to see if they've heard of that. But that sounds more of scientist Sam's field, since he deals with bioinformatics. So if he's familiar, if anybody would know, it would be scientist Sam, since that's technically his field. So I will actually send him a text and ask him if he is familiar with symbiotic information, given his field, and I'll get his position. But again, it is actually up to the person making the claim to substantiate it, not the other person to provide evidence against it. Now, you do have a burden, by the way, folks. You do have a burden for rejecting claims, but it's much less. It's much less than the person making the claim. I don't want to leave people with the thought that you can just reject claims because, well, I don't like it. No, based on the preponderance of evidence, that's not an actual thing.
We do.
We do. You're telling me we have observed dinosaurs evolve before?
Yes.
Come on now.
Yes.
Stop.
We have.
Please.
We have the fossil. We have the fossil evidence.
Okay, so we've been alive for millions of years to see that happen.
No, we have the fossil evidence. So yes, we have seen it.
Stop jumping around back and forth between.
I'm not talking around back and forth.
You saw those dinosaurs die and then.
No, we have the fossil evidence. We have the
dinosaurs.
fossil evidence.
Okay, just stop. Stop. Let me finish my point that I'm trying to make here. Okay. The point that I'm trying to make before we jump into all these other different topics is that just like.
So he's the one that's actually been changing the topic, and now we're jumping back and forth between topics. Interesting.
We see small variations and changes happen now within a species. We utilize that to say, okay, if this was to take effect for millions and millions of years, then this is a reasonable, this is something, a fact in front of us, the fact of evolution that we can use to infer that all of these other changes have happened through millions and millions of years via these mechanisms of evolution. So that's the way that a theory works, right? And so what I was trying to say, my original point is that by rejecting the reasoning behind intelligent design, if you're going to be consistent with it, you're going to have to throw away all of these other scientific theories. And
no, I don't have to do that. Well. I don't have to do that at all.
Because you don't understand the scientific.
No, I understand it perfectly well. I understand it perfectly.
Let's move on to fossils. Let's move on to fossils. So you said.
Well, I want to.
So now, okay, just before he was upset that topics are changing, and now he's forcibly changing the topic. You can't win. You can't win. When TE starts to speak faster, it's a sign.
Freedom. Symbiotic information does not exist according to Google. The only thing you get are the 3 relationships between organisms in ecology.
All right. So I just text scientist Sam, and for those of you who are new, he's a PhD student, bioinformatics. It's the combination of computer science, information technology, and biology, which seems to be the subject of symbiotic information in DNA. He actually studies genetic information and then writes programs to process them. So if anybody would know about it, it'd be him. And according to him, he's never heard of it. So this seems to be another phrase created by creationists that doesn't actually exist in any form. So again, I will await citations for it, but it seems to be something else that has just been fabricated, or we'll say ill-contrived.
Stick with this flagellum. It's It is an
Come on.
argument from ignorance.
Fossils.
You're
No.
saying that because you don't
Yes, sir.
know.
Just so
No,
happen
I
to have a
don't-
subject matter
different
expert
points.
on
You're
hand.
I'm not jumping
when I
around.
want to
You're
press-
jumping around.
What I
I
want
want to.
He just said that he wanted to change the topic, and now he's saying that Brenda's the one jumping around. Like it's this. So if you're dealing with True, know that he's going to switch topics when he's uncomfortable. I am really keen on picking up on people's habits when I'm talking to them, and True has a really bad habit. When he gets uncomfortable, like a lot of people, he does not want to stay on the topic. He likes to change it. He wants to get off that, and it's a good technique, especially when you're really anxious. When he starts getting irritated, he starts speaking faster, and you'll hear the spiels come out, and then his turn to talk will become longer and longer and longer and longer. He'll start to interject more. So you were just bringing up, you weren't trying to defend it. Okay, cool. I mean, if I would ask people who are giving you this information to give you the evidence for it. Because it's interesting, because when you repeat people's claims, it is presumed that you've also at least investigated some. But I'm passively reading what's going on here because I'm also receiving messages. No, and I'm texting Scientist Sam. So saying that, well, we don't know how it happened, therefore God, is an argument from ignorance. We don't know, therefore an intelligent agent did it, is an argument from ignorance. At its very basic form. Very, very, very basic form. Very basic form. Saying that we're not sure how it happened and there's various possibilities is not an argument for ignorance, because that's a true statement. There are various possibilities. You've not actually attributed it to anything. There's a difference between saying those things. There's a huge difference. True empiricism is stating that an intelligent agent did it. That claim requires evidence. There is no evidence to the intelligent designer that he is positing. Right? And it's based on the fact that science, as it is now, not having an account for it, a substantiated account specifically. So I understand that you said that you could be wrong, but I'm explaining why it is wrong. I absolutely understand that point. Prefacing that or adding the caveat that you could be wrong does not allow one to escape criticism or pushback from it. I understand that there's nothing personal against you, but saying that does not mean that it doesn't get evaluated. So maybe that's a bit of miscommunication, or maybe that's not a way that folks are used to communicating. But me saying something that's demonstrably false and me saying I'm wrong does not mean that that claim does not get evaluated.
Stick with the flagellum.
Okay, that's fine, but didn't you just mention fossils in the middle of my point with the flagella?
Yeah, why don't we stick with the flagellum?
So what about fossils, though? I don't understand. How did fossils get you out of that point then? You don't want to
So I want to stick with the flagellum.
Okay.
Right.
Flagellum.
And the point is, you're saying that because you can't understand or imagine how this structure could have evolved.
Oh, Brenda, I caught that. Brenda. You were setting him up for an argument from incredulity. You were setting him up for that, to see if he agrees with it.
That therefore it didn't evolve, and that is an argument from ignorance.
When did I say that?
Don't, huh?
When did I say those words?
That's the implication of the argument,
No, I didn't
which
say
is you're
that.
saying.
You're
Do you
rewriting
think
what I said.
that's what the argument from design is saying, that it didn't evolve, that it was designed.
But
That's
Brenda,
what it means to be designed.
Did I use those words?
That's irrelevant. That's what it means for something to be designed. Do you think the flagellum was evolved?
Brenda, did I use those words?
Do you think it evolved?
So I didn't use those words, did I? You know what they call that?
It's irrelevant.
They call that a straw man fallacy.
No, that's not a straw man. I'm representing your argument accurately.
A straw man fallacy is when somebody attacks another argument rather than the argument presented. I made a causal argument, and you're bringing in this crap about.
There's no such thing as a causal argument. This is something that you made up.
No, there
isn't.
I just made it right now.
There's no such thing.
Causal argument.
No, there's no such thing. So the argument from design is that there are complex structures we can observe in the world, whether it's the human eye, the flagellum, or any other biological structure.
Not at all.
And that these complex structures.
Okay, so evidently there are causal arguments. A causal argument, according to Google's, is an argument which has a causal statement and as a conclusion. It is usually an inductive argument in that the truth of the premises does not guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So that is actually a thing. Him trying to draw a causal argument, we'll see.
Sure. Must have been designed because we can't see how they could have evolved.
No.
Because I had to check on that. Because I've heard of causal arguments, but I don't think that he's
So I'm gonna
accurately trying to
respond
do
now.
that, but
Please let me speak. Okay, what you just said is a lie. It's not true at all. You did it again.
Okay.
You attacked
Tell
me.
me.
Hold on.
so here, okay, this and just to, I'm going to be very fair here. This is a part in God damn it, I see it. I'm not even gonna. Yeah, but Brenda, you're good about taking correction, so I know I'm not too concerned with you. You know what? We all make.
He black. We got a black man in office. He black. We got a black man in office. He black. We got a black man in office. He black. We got a black man in office. Black. When Barack Obama was in office, they didn't try to make sense of anything. They just said he black. We got a black man in office. He black. We got a black man in office. He black. Stop.
Broke ass bitch.
Okay, now that that's over. Anyway. This is a part in conversations, and this is why I had mentioned before, when we start mentioning fallacies, people start to get like a hair up their butts about it. No one wants to say, you know what, my argument was misrepresented by you, and then have the other person go, yeah, I kind of misread. You don't hear that too often. We'll sit and argue, and the entire discourse from then on becomes, well, you misrepresented me. Well, it happens, right? Whether it happens or not is irrelevant. People adamantly deny that they did it and whatever. So the best thing to do is to not really focus on that. What I've learned to do is to say, what about my depiction of your argument I got wrong? Because think about this for a second. You know? If you believe that someone strawmanned you, let's say that you have an argument and I repeat the argument back to you in a strawman form, right? You should be able to tell me how my depiction differs from what you particularly said. Now, that doesn't mean you nickel and dime somebody and you go, well, you become pedantic. Well, you didn't use the exact phrasing that I did. You didn't repeat it back verbatim. No one's going to repeat it back verbatim. Nobody actually does that. All right. So some charitability there, just a bit. But when you ask somebody, what did I actually get wrong about your argument, or what did I misrepresent? That then places the onus on them, because I can accept that I've misheard something. When I was on AXP, I misheard what the guy said. It happens all the time. But that person should be able to, if they say that you strawman them, to tell you what you got wrong. And I've noticed that it's very effective, because some people will just say it's a straw man when they don't like the way that their argument actually sounds once someone else says it. I've had that happen a lot. When I repeat somebody's argument and they hear how stupid it is, you're just a straw man. And so then they get a chance to then say it again in a different version that sounds less stupid. So just keep that in mind. Just Dragnot, dirt bait tips 101, something I've learned after years of having these stupid conversations.
Tell me what the truth is then.
Okay, I'm trying to really hard right now. So As
You've
I
been
mentioned
doing most of
earlier,
the talking.
a straw
True,
man
so,
fallacy is where you attack another argument rather than.
no, we don't need a lesson on what a straw man fallacy is, right? Just get to the fucking point. Like, no one needs a lesson from somebody who hides in his hovel the second somebody gives him criticism. Get to what you stated and how Brenda got it wrong. Nobody else cares about this. Everyone knows what a straw man fallacy is.
The argument that is actually given to you. The design argument isn't that at all. Anybody who's listening to me, you go to the Intelligent Design website and they will explain to you what the
There are
reason
actually
is.
several.
Certain patterns, and this is more or less a direct quote from the ID website, certain patterns are best explained by an intelligent cause because those patterns have been directly observed coming from an intelligent agent. Note that certain patterns are best explained by an intelligent cause. It's not to say anything about complexity. Complexity doesn't have anything really to do with this. There are certain aspects of complexity in different design arguments, but specifically the intelligent design argument is trying to pinpoint certain designs that, based on a uniform experience, have come from an intelligent agent. So when you make it so vague as to say complexity, you can be talking about anything.
Do you think that this ATP synthase is complex? Do you think it's irreducibly complex?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Do you think that ATP synthase is irreducibly complex?
I don't really care if it is or not. It's not.
Well, which one?
That's not what she asked you, whether you cared about the claim or not. It's either you do or you don't.
Yes, it's kind of important, isn't it?
Not to my arguments, no, not at all.
Yeah, it is.
How?
Okay, so you could say it is, it isn't, or I don't know. That you could, any one of those three answers would suit the need for that particular question, right? But you talking about how you feel about the question is not answering the question. Well, your question upsets me. It's not answering the question. This is what I'm talking about when you talk to people like True. I didn't ask you how you felt about my question. Did my question wake up and pee in your cereal? I don't care. You're avoiding the question. And it's there's a reason he's avoiding that question, because Brenda correctly identified one of the metrics that I've heard him in the past mention. I've had conversations with him where he's mentioned irreducible complexity. I have videos still of him mentioning that. I have videos of him mentioning complexity specifically as a metric for how you determine something is being designed. And Brenda knows that. That's why she asked him that very specific question, and that's why he's avoiding it.
Because that's the point of intelligent design.
That's my one.
That structures are irreducibly complex. Therefore, they couldn't have evolved. Therefore, they must have been designed.
That's one of Michael Behe's arguments in regards to the type 3 secretory system and the not the type 3 secretory system, but the bacteria flagella. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ATP synthase. You know that those are two different things, right?
The fact that you gave a different example for what she was talking about is absolutely irrelevant. And you trying to quiz her on the molecular structures and their differences, again, nothing to do with actually what's being discussed. Because I guarantee you, True, if I quizzed you on how well you know the ATP synthase, do you think that you know more than me about that? Because it's interesting that you keep mentioning the wrong type of ATP synthase in your examples. There's actually more than one. Pretty sure you didn't know that. But that's fine. It's actually not important. There's lots of things I can quiz you on as far as biochemistry that you have no idea about. Tons of things. Again, not pertinent in the least. So if we're talking about, again, I'm going to keep going back to this. People being reasonable. Your demeanor as a metric for determining whether or not someone is being reasonable or unreasonable, or the truth properties of this, the veracity of these claims. I'm not seeing anything but someone who is being just recalcitrant, who is being overtly antagonistic, and who has very little respect for his interlocutor.
I'm talking about the argument. I'm talking about the intelligent design argument, which is that we observe irreducibly complex biological structures.
I'm not talking about irreducible complexity.
You're not talking about intelligent design?
I'm not talking about irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity is a subcategory topic within the confines of Michael Behe in a book that he wrote. I don't care about that. It's not relevant to what I'm saying to you. I'm not talking about the bacteria flagella. I'm not trying to compare that to the type 3 secretory system. I'm talking about the ATP synthase, which is in the mitochondria, which has a specific property that only is known to come from an intelligent agent. Whether or not evolutionary theory can count for some protein that has.
So I count about 4 different topics that we've gone through in the last 40 minutes alone. One of which he overtly switched to, which was the fossils, after he complained that they were jumping around topics. Keep that in mind.
Has comparable proteins to it. I don't really care about that. You can use your pareidolia all you want to pattern seek and connect dots. It's not relevant to the ID argument. It's not going to refute it at all.
Could ATP synthase have evolved from simpler structures?
No.
So it is. So you do think it's irreducibly complex?
No, I think that it's not relevant to my argument. All I'm trying.
That's good. That was good. That was good. Brenda just showed that he does have a position on the topic. His answer to that very simple question, that's the conclusion. The fact that it couldn't be built up through evolution means that it is then, by default, irreducibly complex. That is the conclusion. Now, weird for someone who didn't have an opinion about it before to now weigh in on it, but he doesn't realize that this entire time, Brenda's just using the Socratic method. He just answered her question and didn't even realize it. He probably will in a minute, but that was brilliant. That folks, right there, this moment of 42 minutes, right there is a very defining moment. He just answered her question. Weird. What I said was right. He knows exactly where Brenda's going because Brenda knows this topic pretty well. Think about that for a second. If you're talking about honest agents, why did he just give that answer? Ask yourself that for a second. He knew exactly what Brenda was asking him. But rather than saying, you know what? Yeah. Just being honest about it. Yeah, it's irreducibly complex, but that's not really what I want to focus on. He avoided answering it. And then when Brenda follows it up with a rephrasing to draw the same conclusion that he would have gave if he would have answered the original question. It's weird, isn't it? Really weird. But he deserves respect. He wants to grow his channel. He's no longer immature. He's a new man. This is not the same truth that we've been dealing with for years at all. This is a new person. It's bullshit.
Trying to tell you that it's a causal argument. If you're going to sit over here,
you just said you don't think it could have evolved.
Well, let me make this very clear. I am not talking about irreducible complexity, but if you believe that there are any proteins that share homology with it, and I already know what you can mention. I mean, from the top of my head, the hexameric helicases, there's a lot of different things that they try to compare to the ATP synthase. But if you believe that any sort of system can actually gradually diverge to build the ATP synthase via any mechanisms of evolution, I'm all ears. Hopefully you can give me something other than comparing homology using pareidolia to connect dots that you have in your head.
No. So the point is about I do a conceptual analysis of arguments. I don't care about the biology or the chemistry. I couldn't care less. The point is that you are arguing that because ATP synthase is irreducibly complex, it must have been designed, and that is an argument from ignorance.
When did I say irreducible complexity?
When you told me that it couldn't have evolved.
He didn't catch it. He didn't catch it. So whoever put that, I think somebody put it in the chat. He didn't get it at all. He did not catch it. So points for fucking Brenda, folks. Points for fucking Brenda. He still didn't get it. Still missed it. Went clear over his head.
I am telling you that it couldn't evolve, but irreducible complexity is arguing from something specifically. And so what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to get wrapped up in because once I say irreducible complexity, you want to try to pin down any sort of arguments that Michael D. had. I don't agree with everything that comes out of the IG realm. And I'm not sitting over here rejecting that because I think that anything that he said.
You do agree with it. You just affirmed what Brenda was asking you originally. Like you do actually. And for this case, not everything. But for that particular claim that she originally asked you, you do agree with that. So you... offering that piece of information is irrelevant. You've already acknowledged it.
was invalid. But I want to make sure you stick on what I'm trying to say to you right here. If there is an argument that is made for evolutionary theory, which can confirm and prove that the ATP synthase can evolve, great. Let me hear the evidence, and then we can deal with each one of those by points.
Okay, so just let me just kind of stop right here for a second and say, if you are trying to promote intelligent design, if you're trying to support something within the realm of biology that has some type of mechanistic anything, like it, which everything does typically, you need evidence. It's not just you say it and that's the way it is. You actually need to be able to demonstrate that. True and other ID proponents think that because you can postulate something, therefore it's the case. That's not how science works. I don't know how many times I have to say that. I've yet to meet an ID proponent that actually understands science. I'm just going to be honest with you. Absolutely honest with you. Most of them don't conceptually, when I say understand science, how science is conducted and the philosophical underpinnings of what makes something science. To be fair, there are many science enthusiasts who don't understand that either. And they go way, way, way beyond their realm trying to promote science and end up doing a disservice. It helps to understand the foundations. And that takes time. It takes more than a few YouTube videos. But there are resources. All right?
Points basis. And likewise, I will say here strictly that no, there is no evidence whatsoever that the ATP synthase evolved. There is none. There is only pareidolia and already existing features that have certain homologous proteins.
So what he said is actually false. There's actually a lot of evidence that it evolved. And if you want some links to some studies that actually demonstrate how it evolved, it's actually quite well known. As a matter of fact, he actually, now that I think about it, he repeated this claim the last time I spoke to him, probably almost a year ago, when I was in his hangout with Matthew Ecclesiastics, because then I followed it up when I was talking about cancer biology. I actually showed him a paper, a recent one. I think it was probably maybe a year old, maybe not even that showed exactly how it evolved. And of course, he didn't read it. I mean, it's true, but I do remember me personally giving him a paper on that. Him and Matthew.
Pairing, that is it. But just because you connect dots in your head and say, well, this one is more similar.
So again, this is interesting. Didn't he defer to, earlier in the hangout, the fact that there were papers and studies and stuff that Arn Ra was eschewing? Really? Really? Seems that he does that very thing.
This way, this has similar proteins in this direction. That doesn't tell me that they diverge from one another. We have to have some sort of evidence showing that there was an actual divergence. And so I need more than pareidolia. So what I'm trying to tell you, if evolution can account for this, if what do you want to say irreducible complexity, those words aren't coming out of my mouth. My position is just causality. Okay?
No, you're right. The words didn't come out of your mouth. You just affirmed the position that is commonly known as irreducible complex. I don't think that statement is true, right? You didn't hear me say that statement you said was true. You heard me say that I just affirmed that all aspects of that particular statement have the value of truth, but I didn't say it was true. There's a difference.
That's it.
That's not an argument. That's just not an argument. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as the argument from causality.
If you're going to keep playing that game, let me give you an argument. Premise one: certain patterns are only known to come from an intelligent agent. Okay. Premise two: those patterns are observed inside of the cell. Therefore, because those patterns are observed inside of the cell, the best explanation is an intelligent agent.
Yeah, that's begging the question. That's begging the question. That's begging the question. Because you're begging the question in your first premise. You're assuming that certain patterns can only come from intelligence. That's begging the question of intelligent design. You put the conclusion in your first premise.
By questioning it, that doesn't refute the first premise.
Hold
on. Let me respond.
That's not that. Okay, that's not what she said. That's not what she said. She didn't say anything about refuting the first premise. He literally offered a begging the question argument. If your first premise and your conclusion are the same, you're begging the question. But it's sad that and folks, he's encountered these for years. He's had these conversations for years, and he's making very simple mistakes. Very, very simple ones.
First premise isn't questioning,
Let me
it's
respond to
stating.
you, please. Let me respond to you, okay? So since my first premise is that certain patterns in nature are only known to come from an intelligent agent, and you're saying, well, just because we haven't seen another explanation doesn't mean there's not another explanation.
That's not what I said.
Hold on.
No, that's not what's exact. So did all of you hear that? Did any of you hear? Let's actually rewind it. Let's rewind it and see if that's what Brenda said. Just in case I'm wrong. Just in case I misheard what Brenda said. Right? Because True not only has this issue, but Veckel as well. They hear what they want to hear. I encountered that with Veckel recently, like 2 nights ago. He hears what he wants to hear. All right? True claims that Brenda's objection was that there's not another explanation.
Oh, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you, if evolution can account for this, what do you want to say irreducible complexity? Those words aren't coming out of my mouth. My position is just causality. Okay, that's it.
That's not an argument. That's just not an argument. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as the argument from causality.
If you're going to keep playing that game, let me give you an argument. Premise 1.
Okay, so right here, and if you guys want to go back to this is exactly 45 minutes in. This is the timestamp for True Empiricism syllogism that he denies as being a begging the question argument, where the first premise is the same as its conclusion. I can bring up the link, but some of y'all can Google it while you're listening, okay? Here we go. Remember, True Empiricism's statement is that Brenda has said that there are other explanations. He said that that's her contention. Her contention, from what I heard, was that his argument was fallacious.
Certain patterns are only known to come from an intelligent agent. Okay, premise 2, those patterns are observed inside of the cell. Therefore, because those patterns are observed inside of the cell, the best explanation is an intelligent agent.
Yeah, that's begging the question. That's begging the question. That's begging the question.
All right, you heard Brenda say about 3 times that's begging the question, right?
Because you're begging the question in your first premise. You're assuming that certain patterns can only come from intelligence. That's begging the question of intelligent design. You put the conclusion in your first premise.
By questioning it, that doesn't refute the first premise.
Hold on. Let me respond. The first premise isn't questioning; it's stating.
Please, let me respond to you. Okay. So since my first premise is that certain patterns in nature are only known to come from an intelligent agent, and you're saying, well, just because we haven't seen another explanation doesn't mean there's not another explanation.
That's not what I said.
Hold on.
There we go. Again, that's not what she said at all. Her entire response there, and she repeated it multiple times, was that it's a begging the question fallacy. She said it 3 or 4 or 5 times. So you have to really wonder, if you are spending that amount of time explaining your rejection to somebody, and you've repeated it, and they still hear what they want to hear, why would you want to engage with them in the future? It's not as if she said it passingly. She said it under her breath. It was a flippant statement. Spent that entire few seconds she got to speak to repeat the very same thing. And he can't even get that right. He can't even spend the time to understand why it is that she said that. Because that's a good question. Okay, well, Brenda, explain why I can't do that. Okay, and Brenda will. This is how sad he is as a person. Because again, we're gonna evaluate demeanor, because that's our metric, because that's what True uses. If you are too lazy or stupid to the point that someone can repeat something 4 or 5 times in the span of a minute and you still not get it, very basic sentences, then you are not worth speaking to. Flat out. Flat out. This is why people don't talk to True Empiricism. Unless, you know what? I feel a little froggy today. This is why people don't respect intelligent design advocates, because this is what they bring to the table. It's sad. This isn't impressive. This isn't cute. This isn't inspiring. This isn't edifying. This makes me lose IQ points because he can't get basic things right. This is a guy, interestingly enough, that teaches G-Man chemistry. This is his science guy. No wonder he's fucked up. Imagine having somebody this ill-equipped trying to teach somebody. What could he teach you when he can't even listen? He can't even get basic logic right. We can get into whether or not he can redo the syllogism, because he can. He can make it so that it's not fallacious, and then we can discuss whether it's whether it's sound and valid from there. We can discuss that. That can be the next step. But we haven't even gotten that because he can't even get the objection correct because he's too busy trying to hear what he wants to hear. Taking up most of the air in the hangout with nonsense. Again, not because I disagree with him, because he is offering ignorance to both biology, philosophy, and hell, anything else that this is probably going to crop up here. Because this is sad. I feel dumber having listened to him. You're welcome, by the way.
I said that's begging the question.
Hold on. Then the burden of proof is on you to show an alternative explanation.
Again, she said it again. Your argument's fallacious.
I'm not. I don't have the burden of proof. When you put forward a question-begging argument, I don't have the burden of proof.
He's interrupting her.
Hold on, please. If premise one is that certain patterns are only known to come from an intelligent agent, and we have to be an acknowledgement at least that if the ATP synthesis, if you're saying that the literature does say that, as you said earlier, it's referencing the parts. It's a turbine. It's got the parts of a turbine. We can at least be there. Hopefully, we can be that reasonable with each other.
You're just begging. No, I refuse. I don't accept it. You're begging the question. You're saying that certain patterns only come from intelligent designers, and that's begging the question. That's classic.
Begging the question.
Straightforward begging the question. It's when your conclusion.
You don't even know what.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. It's when your conclusion is in your premises, and it's in your first premise.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. If those certain patterns are not only known to come from an intelligent agent, then you have to prove that there is another explanation that can account for where a...
Okay, so now he went from saying that was Brenda's position to now he's charging her with trying to uphold that position. So since Brenda didn't actually say that, since he can't deal with the fact that it is fallacious, he is then going to attach that challenge to her in order for her to fulfill that requirement. That's the response that he wants. You notice that? He gets to make her argument for her at this point because he can't deal with the fallacy. It'd be easier, folks, for him just to redo the syllogism. It'd be very easy for him to do that. Okay, what makes it fallacious? My conclusion and my premise one are the same. I should probably change one of them. Let me reword it. Fixed. They are no longer mirror images of one another. That's not what he does. That's not what he does. He then, instead, has attached an argument to Brenda and is now insisting that she defends a position that she has not espoused. Does that sound like an honest interlocutor to you? Does that sound like somebody who's interested in having discussion with you? Is that a behavior that you think is acceptable? So if I come up with any old argument for true, if I'm talking to him, and I say, here you go, defend that. Do you think that that's an honest behavior for me to do? Does it really matter what position you hold or what the topic is? Is that something that honest people do? If your answer is no, then you see why people don't respect true empiricism and think he's a joke.
Freaking turbine can come from, right?
Hold on a second. I don't have to.
Hold on. Please don't interrupt, okay? If we all know that turbines come from an intelligent agent, we all know that. There's no...
No, we don't. That's what I deny. We don't know that.
Let me finish what I'm saying. Hold on. If we all know...
So I want to see like Brenda get out more than a few words. I would actually like her to be able to talk for maybe just a minute straight. Because this entire time, all Brenda's been able to do is to simply ask questions using Socratic method, obviously, and try and parse out what True is saying, only to be then interrupted by him to go on another spiel and then to eventually change the topic. This entire almost 50 minutes has been filled with that. So it's a bit tedious to listen to somebody who is demonstrably fucking false, who doesn't understand the basics of how to have a conversation, much less make logical arguments that aren't fallacious. But then to hear this particular inept individual begin to then condescend to folks and to exclaim that you shouldn't interrupt when that's in fact what he's been doing himself. The call for cordial discourse falls upon deaf ears when he himself can't live up to what it is that he desires. Again, going back to the very first topic of someone's demeanor being a metric for what's unreasonable and reasonable.
That turbines come from an intelligent agent. That's the knowledge that we have. Don't interrupt me, please.
No, we don't have that knowledge.
Will you stop
saying
that?
it? Well, then stop saying false things.
I'm in the middle of my sentence. You don't know what I'm going to finish saying, okay? If we all know turbines come from an intelligent agent, if we all know that, okay? If we know that fact, and you're assuming that there's another place, right? Like, okay, well, this turbine doesn't, right? Well, where is the other knowledge? I'm only going by what we know, okay? Not by a theory that's trying to account for something, because a theory isn't a fact. It's a fact trying to come to a conclusion. And we know that theories in the past have been more wrong than they've been right. That's why you have to open the door. Well, Karl Popper, with his ideas of falsifiability, you don't want to prove something. It's more important for you to prove something wrong. Theories have been more wrong in the past than they've been right. And so when somebody says something...
Okay, so that's a misrepresentation of what Popper said, but okay. That's a weird mixture of the demarcation issue and a bit of like modus tollens. Like, I'm not sure, he's probably just rambling now, but it seems like he's just like, it's this weird amalgamation of different philosophical underpinnings. But I'm glad that he is at least mentioning Popper in this instance. But you might, if you want to mention Popper and what Popper espoused, it helps to do it and not ramble. Because man, that I don't know what I just listened to, but it doesn't sound like you fully comprehend I don't even know. Like, Jesus. Theories have been wrong in the past. Absolutely. There have been bad science in the past. There will be bad science in the future. That's how science works. Like that, it's not a perfect system. There are no perfect systems. You deferring to that means very little in this context. But all right. But he loves science, folks. He loves science. He understands science.
Something is a scientific theory, it doesn't mean that something is true or a fact. It's just trying to come up with an explanation for something that we're trying to understand.
Theories.
And so that's what I'm trying to say here. Okay, the fact is, based on our uniform experience, all of us just being exposed to modern society and industry, we all know that, okay, turbines tend to be made by creators.
We don't know that.
We don't know that. How are you going to say we don't know that?
Because you're just claiming that to have this knowledge, and you haven't provided any reason for claiming that knowledge. And secondly, I don't have to provide you with an alternative to your argument. You have to present a valid argument, and you have failed to do so. You have not presented a sound, valid argument.
Thank you. It's just sounded salad in the thing. But I just mentioned this, what Brenda just said. We can't even discuss his argument, whether it be sound and valid, because he's not actually presented one. And it is interesting that he's not addressed what Brenda actually said, because Brenda, rightfully so, rejected this charge of having to substantiate some position that she didn't espouse herself, one that he concocted, one that he contrived and attached to her, because that's what an honest interlocutor does. They make an argument for you and they throw it at you, right? So we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Brenda, in this instance here, we're about the 50-minute mark, is trying to get back into the epistemology, the framework in which he uses to determine truth, fact from fiction. How do we get knowledge? Well, actually, not truth. Excuse me. That's a different system. How does he obtain the knowledge that he claims to have? Right? If you're just offering random prayers and shit in my chat, you can go somewhere. If we're to discuss the validity of these things, of these claims, whatever they are, what framework in which you are utilizing some system of something to determine what things are, or how things are or something in the most broadest of contexts, we still don't know. We still don't actually know. We've still not gotten to that point yet, because consistently this guy, true empiricism, and I use that term loosely, has not actually provided that for us. Still waiting on that. Almost an hour into this, and we still don't have that.
And tell me that you and I and every person who is an American or born in Europe or exposed to modern society,
What does that have to do
who
with
is,
anything?
you know, has been exposed to motors, none of us know that a person, a mechanic, a creator has made turbines. We don't have knowledge of that.
It doesn't follow from the fact that there are turbines in airplane engines that a rotor in a cell is the same thing and must have been designed. That doesn't follow.
All I'm doing is this. This is all I'm doing. I'm saying I'm going to stay by the knowledge that's known rather than alternative.
Well, you don't have that knowledge. That's my claim. Is
You
that
know
you don't
we
have
do.
that knowledge?
You know we do.
No, I don't.
Okay. You telling someone what they know is a useless effort. I don't care whether you're atheist, deist, doesn't matter. You're not in somebody's head. I know I like to play armchair psychologist, and I do that with a bit of glee. But that's not to be taken seriously. You don't get to tell somebody else what they know. Unless you are that person. Stop doing that. I can surmise what people know based on what they tell me. That's about it. That's the best any of us have. But you're making a knowledge claim, true, about the knowledge that Brenda possesses. Think about that for a second, true. Think about that. If we were to use your metric about what's unreasonable versus reasonable, what in Brenda's behavior allowed you to peer into her mind to know what she knows? How did you acquire the knowledge that she possessed a specific bit of knowledge? Let's try and make this as coherent as possible with what's already been stated. It doesn't make sense. How could you possibly ascertain that? Because you've drawn fallacious conclusions, then obviously Brenda must have drawn the same fallacious conclusions, is essentially what you're getting at. And anybody else who disagrees with you, or agrees with you for that matter, has also drawn the same fallacious conclusions that are being contested right here. Interesting. One wonders why you didn't become a psychic. Why is there no true empiricism hotline with these magical psychic abilities? One would wonder why you haven't done better in life if you have these magical fucking abilities. This is what I talk about when I say that some of these cats are just absolutely hilarious. They're both psychic and knowledgeable. Not at all inept and incompetent. Not at all too full of themselves to realize just how stupid some of them are. I can't tell you how done I am with this fucking video. We're almost done. There's 10 more minutes left because he's going to get sick of Brenda and she's going to get the boot.
You don't have that knowledge. Your claim is fallacious.
The chat thing is
I've
not
told
working
you
on
several
mine.
times.
I don't know
now.
what I can do with you then. I mean, your
Yeah.
attitude is like, it's like, you won't even
It's not
take
my
the word.
attitude. My attitude is rational.
You know what I'm
It's
saying?
based on,
Okay. Oh,
on,
okay,
on
right.
understanding
Okay,
logic
sure,
and
sure.
reason,
Sure.
and not
yes.
simply
Okay,
making
Let me ask you a
wild
question.
claims.
Can you let me say these
He's
words?
calling Brenda sir. Yeah. How does that help this conversation go by, True?
Can you at least say these words? Turbines come from an intelligence.
No, they don't. You don't know that.
Say that?
You can't claim that. Is the rotor?
Were
Okay,
you?
let me talk for a minute.
Okay,
Let me
okay,
talk for a
right.
minute. Turbines do not come from intelligence. How can I know that? Because the turbine in ATP synthase evolved. It did not come from
That's an
intelligence.
assertion.
Therefore, well, we know that. Therefore,
You know
turbines
that.
do not come from
So
intelligence.
he's crying earlier about being interrupted, so Brenda can barely get out her conclusions and build premises from it, or build premises towards a conclusion because he's interrupting now. Again, the blatant misgendering to be an asshole, him constantly interrupting. Like, it just, again, I want to keep going back, and I keep stressing this because he has a bad habit, a terrible habit of rewriting history. And so when myself or Scholar Fiction review his actions and point out how wrong he is about things, and to show him what a shitty person he is, he gets a little upset. And he goes away for half a year, whatever, and then comes back and then does the same shit, and then claims that he's going to be a new person. Maybe his parents should have raised a better man.
Intelligence. Yes,
You know that.
the evolution of ATP synthase is well known.
Ah, okay.
You don't know that, but that's
true.
Okay.
irrelevant.
Now, okay, good. That's great. Now is your time to give the knowledge of the ATP synthase evolving. We know it. It's not part of a scientific theory. It's not part of evolutionary theory. You just threw out any respect of you knowing actually what science is. I'm sorry, but if you...
I love it when people who don't actually understand science try to denigrate other people who aren't into the sciences. I love it. True. Let me be very frank, and I'm just going to get to the point where he throws her out, and I don't care about after that. True. Let me explain something to you, because I know you still watch my stuff. You at no point in time in life are to denigrate or condescend to anyone about their knowledge in science. Over the last 5 years alone, I've taken more chemistry courses than you can count to in one hand, right? You have been shown to be wrong on so many points that it's almost shocking that you still show your face, so to speak. It is amazing to me that someone as inept as you would dare feel the inkling to try and test somebody's knowledge. I've seen failures of undergrads that I've tutored who are more competent and knowledgeable than you. People who have literally quit their education because they failed to actually study and try. But what makes it worse, True, is that we have history. Those of us here actually know a little bit about you. And it's funny given what we know. Because I just so happen to remember somebody who on multiple occasions had to lie about his education. Why is that, True? Why did you lie on multiple occasions about your formal education, or should I say lack thereof? Huh? When you first told people that you had credentials so high that if you told people what they really were, that they would intimidate people. And then we pointed out Dr. Fiona Robertson. That then changed to, oh, I have a master's degree in organic chemistry.
Freedom! Freedom!
We need a meme of True in a lab coat cutting cells next to drag.
Somebody do it. It's been commissioned. That changed to you then having a master's degree in organic chemistry. So scientist Sam said, hold on for a second. He's from a region that I'm familiar with. Let me check the local universities that would have anything close to that. Guess whose name wasn't on any of those school websites? And who got exposed as being, again, a liar? It was you. Then we got to the interesting story, True, where you took, and I think this is probably the closest to the truth, a semester of general chemistry and dropped out because, and I quote, it was too easy. That was you. These videos have now disappeared from embarrassment. So True, don't pretend, or I should say don't forget, that some of us remember all that stuff. We still remember 4-digit binary. I think it was League of Reason. I think it was League of Reason. If I'm able to find it. Someone still may have the link. I'll have to find it later. Somebody may have the League of Reason, where this is the same guy who said DNA was 4-digit binary. Same guy. Same guy who defended DNA degrading in water because he didn't understand that degrade has a bit of a meaning that needs to be elucidated, where we talk about what happens when things go into solution. But, you know, there's no degrading, not in the sense that he thinks. Was the League of Reason? Okay. But anyway, I wanted to just take a trip down memory lane. Explain. Okay, so ATP mayonnaise. So when we say ATP mayonnaise, and thank you for mentioning that, true empiricism doesn't have many topics that he has memorized, but he has memorized parts of one form of an ATP synthase. Because there's actually there's a bacterial one and there's another version that we have. But it's interesting that in every conversation he can't help but to mention ATP synthase. And he puts it on everything like mayonnaise. So we call it ATP mayonnaise. Yes, he did say 4-digit binary. What's funny, and someone will probably send me the link later, but I'll show you guys, I guess, another time. And I was getting messages and didn't even... I'll read this out, but I won't say who it's from. I don't think Ronnie thinks that he was immature, juvenile, silly, or childish in previous hangouts and now intends to mature the fuck up. No, I think he means I was so young and naive I didn't realize how truly mean and evil those atheists are. Now I've grown up and learned that online atheists are evil. From now on, I won't be nice to them like I used to back when I was young and naive. That's actually a pretty good interpretation. I actually agree with that. But yes, he actually did say 4-digit binary. He heard us talking about it years later because there are some people who remember that from the League of Reason, and we were chatting and laughing about it because we showed it like it was somebody had the link on hand, and he was ashamed. He actually went back and edited the original post. Mind you, this was years after it happened. He was that ashamed. Someone noticed the edit and then contacted the system admin, and they reversed the changes to the original one, then locked it. Because if you go back to it now, it's locked. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's interesting, folks.
You have knowledge. Let's hear it.
Okay.
Type away. Go ahead.
I'll put a link here, and you're going to have to. I put a link in there, and I'm not going to be able to, I suppose, put it. It's during C. Ammentrout, B. Oster, G. December 1996. The article is Rotary DNA Motors, Biophysical Journal.
I bet $1,000. I haven't looked at this yet, but I bet $1,000 for people who are watching. If this is actually not a citation bluff, and does actually have something to do with evolution, it's going to be comparing the homologies of existing proteins or lineages, and then therefore there's going to be no connection of the mechanisms of evolution, showing that this gradual development can happen. I bet $1,000 on this guy's right now. I haven't looked at it yet, I don't believe, but let's see what it is. So, did you give it to me or what? Can you give me the link, please?
I can't post in your chat, dude.
No, the private chat. You can probably send me a link here.
There's a PDF from Cell. Abstract. Many molecular models move unidirectionally along DNA strand powered by nucleotide hydrolysis. These motors are multi-metric ATP phases with more than one hydrolysis site. We present here a model for how these motors generate the requisite force to possess along their DNA track.
Okay. Where's the evolution part of this? Where's the evidence for the evolution of this? That's what you were supposed to. And I'm still looking for it. I'm just listening to what you just read off. Like, you read it, right?
No, I clicked the link from the Wikipedia, which was talking about the evolution of ATP synthase. However, in 2003, N.J. Matsky gave a paper that was proposed a model for the origin of bacterial flagellum.
I already understand about the supposed homologous proteins of the type 3 secretary system and so on. I mean,
that was
but
being discussed,
the
true.
ATP synthase is not the type 3 secretary system, man. It's not the bacteria flagella. It's not
So the point is that there is a proposed evolutionary model for the origin.
So here's something that I would suggest to folks. So this is something that I've learned. Try not to make reference to things that you don't have offhand, because trying to look for it in the middle of a conversation gets tedious, and you will get caught up with trying to find things that you think comport to what you're talking about and things that may or may not, because, and it happens. That's how I pronounce hydraulics. I have a folder called science shit. And so I have so for instance, I'll give you an example. This is just a learning opportunity, folks. Right? And Brenda's actually right. They're very recent studies on the evolution, and a part of understanding where and how things evolved is looking at homology. Also, there are genetics involved, because guess where those parts come from? They come from the proteins, and the proteins are coded by genes. And guess what? If there are different isoforms of the genes, you can kind of see where they came from based on the isoforms. So it's not just looking at them true. So anyway, if you're going to do that, right, have a go-to example. If I'm mentioning like certain aspects of evolution, we'll say that, different aspects, right? And I want to reference specific genes, I have a list of genes in my head already. If I'm perfect example. If I'm mentioning mutations, if there's someone who doesn't understand mutations, I will reference my cancer knowledge with like BRCA1, BRCA2, P53. I have those offhand. I know specifically what to type in, and I have a general idea of what articles I'm already looking for if I don't have them saved already. So having it offhand, it's similar to what True does, but without trying to memorize a spiel, right? Having specifics to just jump to. And that's why you often hear me mention things in my lab when I'm referencing science. Well, that's the closest thing that I have, or things that I've actually worked on. So trying to take a page out of his book doesn't work unless you already kind of have that knowledge. There's a few of us that recognize that the ATP he's talking about isn't the one he thinks he's talking about. And that's what part of the funny part. When he started to get into it with Scientist Sam, he actually referenced the bacterial one and not the one he thought he was referencing. But it helps in conversations when it'll be a smoother flow. But you notice that when he offered his citation, right? How long did y'all go over that? How long did y'all vet the citation that he gave? You notice that? It's important to pay attention to that sort of thing.
Origin of complex biological structures, right?
Okay.
So there is no need to invoke a designer.
But first of all, there are only explanations. Let me make this very clear. I'm going to say a couple of things here. Complexity. I'm trying to do this one by one. Complexity is not the argument of design. When you just say complexity, it's very vague and it's not specific, and I feel like it's being said that way and worded that way deliberately to misrepresent the actual argument of intelligence.
Okay, well, if you feel that that's being depicted in a certain way to deliberately misrepresent intelligent design, why is it that ID proponents routinely defer to it? That's the only reason I even know about complexity, is because I've heard True himself talk about it. True actually had I think he had a debate with Negation of P, if I'm not mistaken, where he routinely mentioned complexity. It could be a different debate, but I want to say it was the one with Negation of P, where he said complexity like 50 times. So it's weird that he says stuff like that, but okay.
intelligent design, and there may be different design arguments that may vary from one another.
Molecular alchemy.
True.
Actually, yeah,
Well,
you're
true.
right.
Every source that I've looked at has said
thinking of another
not
one.
that are not you. They've all said that intelligent design is an argument from irreducible complexity. All the articles I've seen about it have all said that. So I don't understand. So maybe you could tell me what your understanding is then.
Before you constantly jump back and forth, let me say a couple of things here. Even if I were to grant you that there were explanations out there for the evolution of the HTTP synthesis, and there are explanations out there, all sorts of explanations posited out there for all sorts of.
So there are explanations.
Do not do that. You see, when you interrupt me in the middle of my sentence.
Well, this is a conversation.
I understand, but you're right. It's a conversation. That's why you should be respectful and let me finish speaking.
Well, you have interrupted her just like minutes beforehand, True. So it's weird that you get a bug up your ass about it now.
You attack the first couple of words I say. You're not going to refute what I'm saying by avoiding or trying to muddy the water so people can't hear what I'm going to.
So you're admitting that there are proposed evolutionary
no, I'm not.
For these structures. You just said there were.
No, I'm not saying that at all. Let me speak, okay? There are many explanations out there for complex features and structures all over biology. Explanations posited. Now, that was the first part of my sentence. There's the rest of what I'm going to say here. But none of those explanations out there in any article that's ever been presented by any scientist ever actually does what a scientific theory is supposed to do. And
How do you know that? How do you know that? You're not a scientist. You're not. Can you show me to somebody that says that those solutions don't?
I'm not finished saying what I'm trying to say here. Okay, please stop. You don't even know what I'm going to say, and you're already attacking before you can hear.
No, I'm not attacking. I'm questioning. I'm asking you how you know that these solutions.
Why are you questioning me if you don't even know what I'm about to say to you? You see what I mean about that unreasonable skepticism?
I'm not being unreasonable.
Okay, so let me finish talking, please. I'm not trying to be rude to you. I think you're being kind of rude to me. I just want to talk. I just want to finish my thought, please. So the point is that I was trying to make to you right now is that in the hundreds of articles that I've looked through and the discussions that I've had with every single scientist and discussions that I've seen with every single scientist and every single article that has ever been referenced and every article that I've ever read, it's the same thing over and over and over again. They are only comparing homologies of existing features and declaring that this is showing common ancestry because of the similarities that you may find in DNA or in anatomy, or it's something like that. It's always comparing anatomy and
what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Can you stop? I'm trying to explain to you what's wrong with that. Pareidolia, it's pattern seeking. If I look in the sky,
not pareidolia. That's not what pareidolia means.
If I look in the clouds and I see faces in the clouds, I can see that. I can subject.
He's using an example, folks. This is what's interesting. The reason he uses that word, pareidolia, and he gives the example of clouds is because of a video that I did towards him. That's the only reason he even makes that thing. So for those of you who are new, we used to play a game with True because we noticed something about him. He watches all of our stuff. Specifically, we had a show called, he looks at hundreds of abstracts, molecular, and he doesn't actually, looks at a few. But he would watch a show that we would go to called Talking Shit Tuesday. We would take all these types of conversations throughout the week, the previous week, and then we would go, what did this idiot say? And then we would kind of discuss it. And we noticed that after Talking Shit Tuesday, after we've kind of digested the stupid for the week, him and his buddies would make videos kind of responding passively to what had been said. But we noticed that they would use specific terms that we would use because their vocabulary isn't that great. A lot of these guys aren't really that educated. But I purposely introduced pareidolia. And I said, you know what? Let's play a game. If we all start using these terms, they're going to pick up on it and they're going to start saying it. Sure enough, he started using it. And that's because what we observed from him was pattern seeking, as Sock Account says. That's why he uses that term now. So it's well, you know what? If they can say it about us, we're going to say it about them. You know what? Comparing homologies is pareidolia. Seeking patterns where there are none, essentially. The fact that you have, and let me briefly explain something. You can have, let's say, let me give you an example, folks. Let's say a marker, okay? All right, so I'm going to use these writing implements here, right? This is an ancestral form of a particular protein, right? These are the two current forms. This is, let's say, this is the current, the extant form, and this is a what's known as an isozyme, right? This is a variation of this right here. They all come from this. How would you establish that? They all have the same subunits with slight differences. You can see what mutations occurred to get those variations. When you make those connections from the ancestral to the extant, those are direct connections. You aren't drawing comparisons from stuff that's not there. If you are comparing structures to structures, that's not pareidolia. Looking up at the clouds and seeing dinosaurs and faces and cake is pareidolia, right? You see patterns and you're drawing conclusions from stuff that's not actually present. There's no actual dinosaurs up there. There are things that may loosely resemble one, right? So what I'm trying to find as a part of my research is an isozyme version of what's known as a semialdehyde dehydrogenase. Well, Drag, if you were to find this thing and you look at the subunits, you're just drawing no, idiot. No. I'm going to actually end this soon because he's about to kick her out. I can look at the genetics, which is very important. That isozyme is going to have a very, very close resemblance to the sequence that already exists. So when you talk about trying to compare structures molecularly, it's not just drawing connect, but this tells you that True doesn't actually understand that. You'll hear this argument typically for people who study anatomy, and I hear anatomy and homology often like I hear them used interchangeably, which there's a difference, but this is kind of one of the issues you have with people who don't actually understand a lot about this stuff. And I'm not talking about making mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, but people who have gross conceptual errors like True. So let's go ahead and play this, and I hear people alive. So if folks alive, post their links in the chat, folks, and y'all go over there. I need to go for a walk.
Objectively see what I want to see. And if I look at things from an evolutionary perspective, already having this idea that evolution is true, I can connect dots all over the place by looking at patterns and connecting those dots. But the way scientific theory is supposed to be gone about is by utilizing the mechanisms of evolution to show by step, these gradual changes can actually lead to those connected dots that they're assuming are actually connected. And there is not a single article out there that exists that actually shows any mechanism of evolution actually being able to accumulate to build any of these.
That's a claim. Can you support that claim?
Then what you're the burden of proof is on you.
You hold the burden of proof. You're the one claiming that they don't meet scientific muster. Show me the proof.
Brenda, hold on a second. I'm saying this to you specifically. There are no articles out there. I'm saying this. I've looked, I've done the research. They don't exist. If you're claiming that evolutionary theory can actually account for these complexities, that
you said that they do exist.
Can you stop over talking me, please?
But you said they do exist, and now you're saying they don't exist?
Brenda, can you stop over talking to me? The complexities of evolution, if you're saying that you're the evolutionist here, that there is actual evidence out here that these complexities can arise, the burden of proof is on you to show that this is actually the possibility. Show it.
But you admitted that that those exist. You admitted that. You said that those explanations exist out there. You said you just don't accept them.
So now you're just being dishonest.
No, but you said that.
No,
you said that you don't think that they are valid.
Brenda, what I said to you is that there are many, you gotta listen to me, okay? There are many explanations out there all over the literature. It's everywhere. See what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
That's not the end of my sentence. Listen to the rest of it. There are many explanations out there trying to account for the complexity of evolution. There are many explanations, but if I just throw explanations out there with no connecting evidence, all it is an explanation that's in line with your already subjective opinions on the view. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
No, that's wrong.
That's wrong. It's okay that you
just your opinion.
So now it's based on whether or not you adhere to the preponderance of evidence is based pretty much on your personal credulity, on your subjective opinion, as he likes to call it, right? It's credulity. Remember earlier, folks, because he's about to boot her, and we're about to end this. Remember what he said at the beginning, where the way that you determine whether something is unreasonable or reasonable is by behavior. What does his behavior tell you? What does his demeanor tell you? He amended it later and said that it's also based on a preponderance of evidence. Oh, interesting. What did Brenda just get him to admit? Preponderance of evidence agrees with me. True, you just disagree with it. True's retort is that, oh, well, hey, that's based on your personal credulity. Now we have another aspect to it. Personal credulity. Interesting. The longer we listen to him, the longer he has to amend what he says. So now we're at the third tier of how he determines what's reasonable and unreasonable, what's true and what's false. At least to some degree.
That's just your opinion, dude. That's just your opinion.
If it's just my opinion, then give me the evidence. You're the evolutionist.
No, you cited the evidence. You said that all throughout the literature, there's all these explanations. Then all I have to do is point to that.
There's a lot of explanations, but I can give you an explanation for anything. Here's my explanation for how the
you're conceding. You're conceding.
Let's play that the atheist game. Okay, unicorns made the universe, right? That's in my explanation. That explanation doesn't mean anything until you can actually demonstrate that's true, right? We'll just play your game from an atheist perspective. You understand what I mean? Explanations don't mean jack if they're just assertions that you're making that are not.
But you think that the published literature is just assertions without evidence?
If you have any facts in reality that can actually indicate that what you're saying is true, then prove it.
Well, you're the one who has conceded the argument already. You've said that there's all these explanations out there in the published literature.
So Erie is interrupting her yet again, even though he just requested that she not interrupt him.
In published literature, and they're not just unicorn charts, they're actual explanations with citations and evidence published in reputable peer-reviewed journals. You cited that, not me. You cited it. You conceded the argument. You have conceded that there are, in fact, evolutionary explanations for these structures. You have conceded the argument.
Wow. Okay, so I don't know what's going on here with you. I mean, this is what you see what I mean? This is what I'm talking about. I mean,
now rather than talking to his interlocutor, he's just talking to the audience now, because that's respectful.
A perfect example of what we were just talking about with Alan Ra. You just morph everything in your head to try to fight information that you don't want to accept.
I didn't fight at all. I'm accepting your concession. I graciously accept your concession that, in fact, there are explanations for all of these structures in the literature, in the professional scientific literature, in peer-reviewed journals. And that's your words, not mine. Mm-hmm. I didn't bring it up. You did. You conceded the argument. You've conceded the argument.
I conceded the argument.
Yes. Because you admit. Because you admit that
to my face, what you're doing, you're so stubborn.
Listen, try to listen for once.
You're so stubborn with the information that right in front of my face, right to my face, you are going to ignore the rest of what I said. Right to my face, ignore the rest of what I said. Focusing on the first portion. What is the rest of what you said? Focusing on the first portion of what I said. Ignore everything else that I said, so that you don't have. You're doing this so you don't have to deal with the ramifications of what I brought up to you. Okay. If there is, because remember that you. Please stop. Remember, you are the evolutionist here. This is what we're concerned with, right? You told me.
True. Please stop. No, I want to talk.
Brenda, please stop.
I want to talk. I would like to speak.
Please stop.
No, I would like to speak.
Brenda, can you please stop?
I would like to speak.
You're monopolizing this entire conversation.
I want to speak. So you said that there's evidence all throughout the literature, and then you said that you don't think, in your opinion.
Okay. So the discussion is over. It's going way downhill way too fast. I'm not dealing with that nonsense. And so
There we go, folks. There we go. So, when True cannot get people to acquiesce to his fallacious and nonsensical arguments, his only recourse is to silence them. Proof is in the pudding. Here you go. For somebody who monopolized 90% of the conversation, who changed the topic no less than 4 times, somebody who was disrespectful from the beginning, somebody who actively denigrated other people's knowledge while he himself knows very little, this is a result of it. This validates what I had said before. If you had not seen my previous video, folks, go watch my previous video about True. You can tell who the video is about from the thumbnail. But this validates everything that I've been saying. This is the same stuff he's always done. This is why I say, you know what, if you want to deal with him, have fun with him. Have fun. Have fun. Because he's not someone that's worth talking to. There are quite a few people who, believe some of these things that are a pleasure to speak to because they're interesting. But then there are people like True who are so sensitive to people disagreeing with him that he can't control himself. They get so upset when people criticize him that he literally has to go on hiatus because he gets so frustrated in real life. You almost have to feel sorry for somebody that's this pathetic. It's sad. Really sad. But he is some people's go-to science guy. I feel sorry for him. That's probably why you don't know much science. So, I hope people walk away from this, especially those of you who are new, who are trying to get into having debates. There are better people to talk to. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. There are way better people to talk to than True Empiricism. If you just want to try to test your patience, if you want to try just to do it, just to say, I did it, I got the t-shirt, go for it. I won't tell you not to. But it's my humble opinion that there are way better young earth creationists to speak to. Way better. I think that he's an idiot. He's pathetic. He's a child. And that he is incapable of actually learning what he needs to learn to adequately discuss this topic or most any other topics. You sat and you listened to the same thing that I did. And I can tell you that this is classic True Empiricism. He has learned nothing in the last few years. Nothing at all. So on that note, folks, that's it. Thank you, Brenda, for, or I guess you're thanking me for, for reviewing it. Well, that was painful. I don't really watch his shit anymore, but I am now reminded as to why I don't watch his shit, because it's the same thing that happens every time. He's a disrespectful cunt that obviously was raised by fucking wolves that shows no actual patience, that shows no actual grace, that shows nothing that would resemble him being anywhere close to being a Christian or anyone of any merit. He is like Nephi. They're both very kindred spirits in that manner. But I want people, again, and this is an appeal to people who want to have these type of discussions. If you want to do that, pick up on what Brenda did. I tried to do my best when I paused it to identify different techniques. This entire conversation was Brenda utilizing the Socratic method. The entire conversation. In fact, you saw 2 instances where she caused him to concede to points that she had stated earlier that he adhered to. And he probably still doesn't even realize that she did that. When you are savvy enough and having these discussions, you can do that too. It's not very hard. This guy isn't that bright. He is not that bright. It's not too hard to do. Understand what your opponent's saying. Take your time to parse out what's being said. Don't take on a burden of proof beyond which you can substantiate right then and there. Be very careful about that. It's not a race. Understand who exactly it is that you're speaking to, because their habits will give you an indication as to whether or not you need to be more or less charitable. Steel manning True's argument does not help. He is not the person to do that to, because he takes that as an insult. If you're talking to Messenger Reveals, using the Socratic method is an affront because he's an idiot. Know who you're dealing with when you speak to them. Try to keep the conversation on the topic, because, mind you, this topic was a chat on atheism versus theism. How long did they actually talk about that? So, anyway, folks, that's it. Skylar Fiction is live. There's an update. If you're interested in Silverman news, then you might, well, I already know what's going on because I have the inside scoop, but go watch it. Nate just did an expose on what's going on with Silverman dropping the lawsuit. Go check out Skylar Fiction. If you're here from AXP, go subscribe to Skylar Fiction. Please, somebody put his link in the chat. If you like me, you will like Skylar Fiction. He and I cut our teeth in some of the same chat rooms, some of the same hangouts, and he and I are very much alike. I would much rather see his channel grow than mine because look, you know what? He's putting in the work. He's putting in the work. I just do this for fun. So anyway, folks, that's it. Thank you again, Brenda. I'm out of here.